All right, welcome back to the Young Turks. We do interesting different programming here, and we decided to try this, which is going to be fun for everybody. I'm going to debate 8 conservatives back to back, and the topic is simple: should Donald Trump be president or not? They're going to take the position of yes. I'm going to take the position of no. I'll read some of your comments in between the interview/debates, and I'll give shout outs as much as I can. And by the way, at the end, for conservative viewers, when we go to the bonus episode for members, I'll read some of your super chats, your questions and your comments, presumably against me, but you never know. Mander Pander Salamander, for example, thank you for hitting the join button below and becoming a member. We appreciate you. And let's get started. All right, joining me now, Liz Wheeler. She's the host of the Liz Wheeler Show, author of Hide Your Children, Exposing the Marxists Behind the Attack on America's Kids. And she's going to take the pro-Trump position. Liz, welcome.
Hi, Cenk. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, I'm struck by the title of your book, so let's start there if you don't mind. You said that exposing the Marxists behind the attack on America's kids. So do you think Kamala Harris is a Marxist?
I think her policies are in line with Marxist ideology. If you look at an open borders policy, if you look at her support of Black Lives Matter, if you look at her soft on crime policies, if you look at her embrace of redistribution of wealth, a lot of that is in line with a Marxist ideology that takes private property or individual rights away from people and ostensibly gives them to the collective, but really gives them to government.
So Liz, you know Marxism is when the government takes all the private property, right? So your car, your home, your company, etc. You don't think Kamala Harris is going to do that, do you?
Well, when I analyze a politician's ideology, oftentimes, of course, they don't tell the American voter exactly where that ideology lies. But if you look at the people that Kamala Harris has hung around her entire life, or the people that she's praised. Let's use the Black Lives Matter organization, for example. In 2020, we all watched the summer of rage after George Floyd when Black Lives Matter rioters were torching buildings, assaulting cops. Kamala Harris posted on her X account, the tweet is actually still live for anybody interested in looking at it, encouraging the American people to go and donate to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which is a fund to bail out violent criminals who are arrested for the assault of cops or for the arson and the vandalism, the looting, the robbery that they were committing. And that's, I mean, you can't argue that that is a position, a political position that is encouraging of law and order. That would be a political position of chaos, of anarchy. And the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, the founders, I mean, Patrisse Cullors, for example, Alicia Garza, they actually admit they are trained Marxists. So that is not something that I am inferring from the Black Lives Matter movement. It's something that they have said that motivates their organization, and Kamala Harris supports that. Now, I know there are a lot of people in the United States, especially during 2020, who weren't Marxists. They thought they were supporting a good cause, but unlike many conservatives, I actually don't think Kamala Harris is stupid. I don't think that she's a dumb person. I think that she is an ideologue, and I think she knew exactly what she was doing when she supported not only the Summer of Rage, not only the violent rioters that were torching cities, but this organization themselves.
So, rioting and bailing out rioters, terrible. I agree with you, especially the ones that are guilty and trespassing and violence, etc. So that's why you were livid about Donald Trump saying that he's going to pardon all the January 6th rioters, right?
Well, listen, I mean, if you go back to what I said after January 6th, I do not support anyone breaking the law. I don't support the people that, broke windows and did things that they weren't supposed to do. But the penalty was not equal to the crime, of course. And you know this, the Supreme Court has ruled on it. You know that the terrorism enhancements for people who walked into the Capitol, or at least into the region, isn't exactly equal to walking through what they thought was an open gate, or even going into the Capitol.
Seems like you're excusing it, Liz. It seems like you might be a little bit of a Marxist on that one.
No, I mean, I think the problem with January 6th was a couple of things. The problem with January 6th is the majority of Americans, this actually includes independents, by the way, and a hefty minority of Democrats, think that the government had agents that were, let's just say, inflaming the tensions around January 6th. And I think that freaks out a lot of people on the left and the right. I think you'd agree, Cenk, that that's the American government has a long history of doing that to people on both the left and the right, and we shouldn't support that no matter what political party that we're in. But when half of the country has questions about the integrity of an election, you can sit there and you can mock them, or you can say, well, was it completely free and fair? Do people have valid points? Aside, of course, from the few people who acted too far that day.
Yeah, so look, I'm going to argue that I'm enormously consistent here. I'll leave it to the viewers to see if they agree. But here's how what I said about Black Lives Matter protesters and the January 6th protesters. And I'm not sure that there's anybody else in the country who said it about both of them.
Do you think they were treated equally?
Yeah, hold on. Let me explain. So the people that the overwhelming majority of the protesters in 2020 that came out to protest what happened to George Floyd were peaceful, overwhelming majority. Some people broke the law, started the fires. They should definitely be prosecuted, okay? On January 6th, actually the majority of the people who came to hear Donald Trump speak didn't go to the Capitol and didn't do anything wrong. They just came to a political speech. And so when they get lumped in with the rioters, I said that's not fair. They didn't go down and riot. So I'm consistent on both of those. And I even said about the January 6th guys, they should be prosecuted. But I'm consistent in that riots sometimes are the voice of the unheard. And the MAGA guys feel unheard because they hate the establishment so much, and the establishment never gives them a voice, and that's why they like Trump. So I get it, I get it. Nevertheless, they broke the law. The guys in 2020 that started the fires, broke the windows, broke the law, and they should be treated consistently. But you're saying supporting Black Lives Matter protesters who were peaceful and bailing out the guys who didn't do anything wrong, etc., is Marxism. But when it comes to January 6th, all of a sudden, well, we should be a little bit more lenient to rioters. That's what it seems like to me, but go ahead.
No, that's not what I said. Let me clarify what I said. I said the organizers, the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, Patrisse Cullors and Alicia Garza, admit that they are trained Marxists. They want to abolish the nuclear family. Their own words. You can look at the video.
Is there a place where you go get trained on it? I don't know. Who does the training?
Well, you can ask them.
Okay.
You can ask them. Yeah. They're the ones that said it. We can post it on X. People might be interested in seeing it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of people actually
Liz, I'm not doubting that they said it at some point. I just am amused at the absurdity of it. There's no Marxist. There's no actual Marxist in American politics. Nobody's coming to get your house and your car. This is all like trying to scare people. Nobody's.
Cenk, you've been around politics long enough to take politicians at their word when they actually tell you what their strategy is.
In fact, I want to get to that next. But go ahead, finish your thought.
But let me explain what I was saying.
Yeah.
The founders of Black Lives Matter say that they are Marxist. I see no reason not to believe them because that's what their actions show. When you sound a little bit like CNN, remember that CNN video that went around during the Minneapolis riots when the CNN guy was standing there and he's like, mostly peaceful riots, and in the background there was all that fire and all that arson. It's like a meme on X now.
But you guys say the same thing about January 6th.
There's billions of dollars of damage, so it wasn't just 1 or 2 or 3 people that were looting all those stores and assaulting cops and burning people up. I mean, you people on the ground, the American voter, I believe they're smarter than to fall for the idea that it was just a couple of people that were engaging in violence around that time. So all of that to be said, the violent people that were doing the work of the Black Lives Matter organization, yeah, that's engaging in Marxism. And specifically to Kamala Harris bailing people out, let's talk about who the Minnesota Freedom Fund bailed out. There was a guy that was imprisoned, and because he was bailed out by this fund, he went and assaulted a woman. There was another guy that was bailed out that went on to kill someone. So this is not a harmless shoplifting, getting bailed out so he can get home in time to go to dinner in his mother's basement. These are violent criminals who went on to hurt other people. I would think you'd have a problem with that. I certainly do, and I know a lot of our viewers will too.
But I just told you that I had a problem with the people who committed the crimes. But you told me the January 6th guys were mostly tourists. Or to be fair to you, you didn't say that. I think Tucker Carlson did. So like I'm just pointing out the obvious double standard. But let me go to the next thing that you mentioned.
No, I mean, I said it didn't fit the crime. This is my question. Jacob Chansley, who is the guy that people call QAnon shaman. Do you think if he had not been apprehended that he would have gone on to overthrow the seat of American government? Like, what do you think would have happened to that? What do you think he would have done if he wasn't stopped?
And actually, Liz, I mean, I want to get back to the idea of Kamala Harris being an ideologue and believing politicians or not. But but just real quick, last thing on this. No, what I've always said about the rioters is that they were the pawns used by Peter Navarro, Eastman, that's Trump's lawyer, Trump himself, etc., that came up with a plot to delay the certification. They wanted Mike Pence to do it. When he didn't, they got people so angry they wanted to murder Mike Pence. And so the whole point of that was not to take the building and keep it. People who imply that are being super silly. That would never, ever work. No, it was to delay the proceedings so they could bring in their fake electors. And they did have fake electors. I interviewed Rudy Giuliani at the RNC, and he said the real Trump electors wouldn't do it. And so they had to bring in fake electors to do it. And Liz, that's why I'm against Donald Trump. I don't like the establishment at all. But a guy who says that he wants to terminate the Constitution, set up a fake elector scheme to overturn an election, that guy hates America. I'm not gonna vote for a guy who doesn't believe in our democracy and our Constitution. So I don't understand how you guys can get past that.
Well, a couple of things. I don't think that that's an accurate characterization of what happened. I mean, if you go back in American history, in 1960, Hawaii actually rescinded the certification of their electoral votes, meaning they took back their electors because they had fraud, and they wanted to make sure that that fraud was taken care of so that people could count on the integrity of their votes. So it's not unheard of for a state. It is wonky, it is nitty gritty, it is uncommon, but it's not unheard of historically, nor is it illegal for states to reevaluate what slate of electors are sent to the vice president to count. That's actually what was asked of Vice President Mike Pence. And you can agree with what Mike Pence did, you can disagree with what Trump did, that's fine. But the accurate characterization of what happened is there were state legislatures from Pennsylvania, from Georgia, from Wisconsin, from Arizona, who actually wrote to Congress and said, well, wait a second, now that we have more information about some of the things, the electioneering is what I call it, the changing of the rules that happened before the election. Now that we have more information, we want to make sure that our election was secure. We want to make sure that the integrity of people's votes are protected. So just hold on a second before you certify to make sure that this slate of electors is actually the slate of electors that we want to send. That's what was asked of Mike Pence. He wasn't asked to judge which slate of electors was real or not real. He wasn't asked to make that decision unilaterally. He was just asked to hold on a second.
So Liz, they were fake electors, and second of all, he didn't win the election. So
what do you mean when you say fake electors, though?
So you have your slate of electors. Like today, Kamala Harris has her slate of electors, and Trump has his. Those are already in place, and they had them in 2020 as well. But Donald Trump's real electors wouldn't sign off on him winning the election because he didn't. So they had to bring in fake electors that weren't even Trump's, because they were the only ones willing to sign documents saying he won when he didn't win. I mean, Liz, you know he didn't win, right? That's not what was
asked of Mike Pence. That's not what was asked of Mike Pence. This is a really, really important point for people to understand.
No, let me clarify. What was asked of Mike Pence is don't certify so that it goes back to the states, and then we'll have the local Republicans pretend you won and install your fake electors. So
no, listen, you're familiar, I'm sure, with the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. You're, I'm sure, familiar with how the Electoral College works. You know that, say if there's a governor of a red state, take Kansas, for example. If the governor of Kansas, which Trump won, and this is hypothetical, if he decided to send a slate of Kamala electors to the United States Congress, that would be fraudulent. That would not be how the people voted. So is there any recourse for that? Well, sure, there's recourse. He can call a joint session of his state legislature. They can send an alternate slate of electors. There are things that happen if there's any kind of fraud, and that's what hasn't been litigated in our country. That's what the question was on January 6th that Mike Pence decided that Trump disagreed with him on.
You send the real electors.
Listen to what I'm saying.
You don't invent
new electors. I know it's wonky, and I know it's complicated, but your viewers probably want to know exactly what happened, because the reason that you and I both work for alternative media organizations is because we don't want to just constantly be hit with the spin of the corporate media. We want to actually engage with what the truth is. Sometimes the truth is complicated. So in my hypothetical example, there is recourse for what to do if a state sends electors, but there are people in the legislature who have a role, a constitutional role, of course, as you know, to send those electors. And if the governor of that state does not call a joint session of the legislature, well, then members of that legislature asked Pence, hold on a second while we figure this out. That's what happened.
But they already figured it out, Liz. So last two things on this. So look, number one, in a situation where one guy's trying to cheat, like the governor of Kansas, et cetera, in your hypothetical, you would then install the person's actual electors. You don't have to come up with new electors. They both have slates of electors. So that's why the fake electors gives the game away, that they were definitely wrong. Second of all, you would do that in a scenario where you actually won the vote. But Georgia did 3 recounts, a hand recount. Arizona did 2 recounts. They all did recounts. It wasn't even close. Liz, at this late date, are you still pretending that Donald Trump won the 2020 election?
Well, listen, I think it's really important to define the word win, because this is one of those gotcha questions that you might see on CNN or MSNBC. But what many conservatives were concerned about in the wake of the 2020 election, and a lot of conservatives feel the same way today, it's not whether the number of ballots was greater for Donald Trump or for Joe Biden. It was whether the rules were changed before people cast their ballots that allowed certain votes to be counted that otherwise shouldn't have been counted. And I'll give you a specific example of this. In the state of Wisconsin, there were ballot drop boxes placed around the state. Well, those ballot drop boxes, according to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, this was litigated afterward, are against the Wisconsin Constitution. So the people that cast those ballots, no, they specifically weren't committing fraud. They weren't voting in someone else's name, but they may have been counted invalidly. And so I think, obviously, again, it's wonky. It's not that those people were running around trying to steal people's votes, but the rules had been changed without the authority to change them. The people that changed them didn't have the authority to change them, didn't have the authority to put those drop boxes in place. And so, yes, the vote totals may have looked like they favored Joe Biden. I'm not necessarily contesting that, but were the rules rigged before the election in order to get that outcome? I would say, yes, we have evidence of that.
Yeah, it's nonsense. So the Republicans—
the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled on it. Anybody can go look at that ruling.
I got you. No, I understand the claim you're making. My point is, Brian Kemp, for example—
where is the Wisconsin Supreme Court wrong on that?
Hold on, let me explain. So Brian Kemp, for example, when he was running against Stacey Abrams, especially the first time, wiped away a lot of Democrats from the voter rolls, pretending that, oh, I am just getting rid of dead people on the voter rolls. Didn't do it to Republican counties, did it only to Democratic areas. It was, in my opinion, massive cheating. So I hated that election. I hated the results of that election. I thought it was an election that was illegitimate in a lot of ways. But what's done is done. I hate that that's true, but the votes were cast. You don't get to say afterwards, well, I didn't like the way you did the election. What are we gonna do, just redo it? I'm gonna pretend I won? Should Stacey Abrams have gone and rioted and tried to take the Georgia state capitol? No, we have rules. By the way, the Republicans are doing it right now. They're wiping away voter rolls all over the country. I hate that they do that, and they should be prevented ahead of time from doing that. But if we can't prevent them ahead of time and people go to vote, it is what it is. So this constantly re-litigate, no, I'm not leaving office. I'm not leaving office. Everything is cheating. If I don't win, it's all cheating.
Okay, someone who doesn't have the authority to change a rule.
Then Liz, hold on, let me finish the thought. Then, okay, you say, okay, if Kamala Harris thinks that you guys did cheating just the way that you described and just the way that I just described, since she's the vice president, she could not certify the election, right? And she could say, that's it, I'm sending it back, and I got a bunch of fake electors who are gonna come in and say I won. Hey, I thought you were cheating ahead of time.
I wanna hear your answer about Wisconsin. Was what they did in Wisconsin fair? Was that in accordance with election law?
Which part of Wisconsin? Because there's a lot of things.
When they put the ballot drop boxes all around Wisconsin, was that in accordance with the Wisconsin Constitution?
I haven't studied the Wisconsin Constitution. That's a hilarious thing to ask. But ballot drop boxes are perfectly legitimate. Republicans use them as well. In fact, right now, Donald Trump is encouraging people to vote by mail. So, I mean, you're
it's a very important question, and here's
desperately to hang on to something so you could please Donald Trump and say, oh yeah, you won, Donnie, you won. He didn't win.
I gave you a concrete example of a way that votes could be cast seemingly validly, but counted invalidly, and it's a concrete example. It's a very simple question. If ballot boxes are against the Wisconsin Constitution, people who didn't have the authority to put them there anyway, and those votes were then counted.
Okay, even if you find one loophole, hey, I think there was one thing that was slightly wrong in Wisconsin. How about Georgia? How about Arizona? He lost. The more you guys talk about how we don't like it. It looks terrible. Your polls go down. So I'm glad you're still sticking to that position. Now let's go back to the other thing.
Listen, you can't answer the question because you're on the wrong side of that. You can't answer the question because—
No, Liz. I'm happy to adjudicate everything in the right process. What's the right process? We live in a democracy, 3 branches of government, and the right process is you go to the courts. So if you guys
have gone— the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled on it.
Let me finish. So if you guys go to the courts and you prove that it was unconstitutional and they have a remedy for that, God bless. And you did go to the courts and you lost all 61 cases because you guys are monumentally full of crap.
What did the Wisconsin Supreme Court say?
Okay, I can ask you about some random piece
Cenk,
of court too. I don't know what the Wisconsin Supreme Court said. Do you know what the court said when they asked Rudy Giuliani and one of the— hold on, Liz. You know what? Let me answer. Then I'll go to you.
When you don't know about the adjudicated case.
Okay, so no, I know that you guys went to court 61 times and lost every single time. I don't know if you know this. Okay, hold on. Let me do the same trick you're doing. When the court asked Rudy Giuliani, sir, can you please present your evidence on voter fraud? What did Rudy Giuliani say?
Cenk, I will answer that once you answer about what the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled on this. Did they say that it made the election results, that it protected the integrity of the vote? Or did they say, this is actually super interesting. Your viewers are gonna love what the Wisconsin Supreme Court said.
Okay.
The Wisconsin Supreme Court said, putting ballot boxes around the state of Wisconsin, which violated the Constitution of the state, was illegal. But they said this should be something that voters take care of afterward, because you do have a point, and there is a history in our country that says that once an election has been certified, once it is a certain length of time past the election, it's not in the interest of the country to yank that person out of the White House and install someone else. I don't actually disagree with you on that. But that was the problem between Election Day and between January 6th, is that's a long enough amount of time to figure out what had happened, but Democrats weren't interested in figuring out what had happened because they were the ones that rigged the election to begin with. That's dishonest.
So Liz, look, I hate what Trump did in crying and trying to overturn our democracy after he lost. But what you're doing is a giant favor, not to me because I don't like it, but to the Democratic Party. Because what you're saying is, hey guys, don't worry if you lose. Just go to court, try to find some loophole, try to invalidate all the results. Who cares about who actually won, who got more votes? Just litigate. Come up with fake electors, never give up. Don't do a peaceful transition of power. If you need a delay, bum rush the Capitol. The American people don't want that. It's massively losing ground for you guys. Anyways, to finish the thought, Rudy Giuliani says, I have no evidence. Okay, so now, before we run out of time, we're about to. So go back to the ideologue issue. You say Kamala Harris is an ideologue. I don't think she's an ideologue at all. And I'm not a big defender of Kamala Harris. I'm definitely not a defender of the establishment Democrats. And I think that mainly what they do and what the establishment Republicans do, but unfortunately also what Donald Trump does, is they do whatever the donors ask them. So if corporate donors control these politicians, so if a corporation that's a drug company or a defense company, et cetera, tells Kamala Harris what to do, she's much more likely to do it. I think it's also true of Donald Trump. So generally speaking, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that I mean, she was on stage with Liz Cheney, right? Of course she is beholden to the military-industrial complex. This is what I would say about the contrast of this election. None of this is hypothetical. Donald Trump has been president. Kamala Harris has been vice president. Before that, senator. Before that, the attorney general of the state of California. So we know what we're getting with both of them. And actions speak louder than words. This election is actually not about either of their personalities. It's not about their X accounts. It's not about their word salads. It's about you. It's about you and I, and it really comes down to the question, were you better off under Donald Trump or are you better off under Kamala Harris? And I would argue that Kamala Harris has brought us to the brink of World War III through the Ukraine war and her funding of the Ukraine war. She is the sitting vice president after all. This is entirely dangerous. I don't want to die in war with Ukraine. You don't want to die in war with Ukraine. We don't want our money devalued. All this spending on her wars, which she profits from, has caused inflation to skyrocket. Since she and Joe Biden took office, inflation has skyrocketed by 20%. I'm talking the price of gas up 46%, the price of food up 22%, the price of electricity up 30%. Meanwhile, she denies that there's a crisis at the southern border. We have millions and millions of people crossing every year across our border. It's completely unsecured, including criminals and terrorists. There are right now over 600,000 illegal aliens in our country who have a criminal history, which is dangerous to us. And meanwhile, our cities, she did not do anything to help the violent crime rate in our cities. In fact, during the Biden administration, crime has gone up by 4.5%.
Yeah.
If you contrast that to how we were under Donald Trump, it's not rocket science. Everyone in this country and everyone watching the show don't necessarily have the privilege to vote emotionally. A lot of people have to vote for the candidate who is better for them, who makes it easier for them to make a living and have a job, and makes it easier for them to build up a savings and take care of their family. That choice is pretty obviously Donald Trump.
So I wish I could counter all inflation, immigration, all crime, all those issues. I'll do it with other conservatives that are about to come on because I don't want to take into their time away. We're out of time here, but and Israel for sure too, because Donald Trump is saying we should start the war immediately. He's a very ironic anti-war candidate. Anyways, but I do want to end on one last thing, Liz, which is that I wanted to note the irony that in the beginning you said that Kamala Harris is a type of Marxist and could take away people's companies. And at the end, you said she works for companies and corporations and her donors. So does she want to take away private companies or does she want to help private companies?
Probably both. I mean, people in power are completely corrupt. You know that about Kamala Harris. I mean, she's nothing if not a power-hungry, power-grabbing, corrupt politician here. If you're talking about, I mean, I do have one last question for you. I look at your content sometimes. I certainly looked at your X account. How, and this is a sincere question, I'm just curious, how can you consider voting for Kamala Harris when she sits on stage with Liz Cheney, who is the neocon of all neocons? Like, she just wants to make money off of sending people to war and killing people. How can you vote for her if she's on stage with Liz Cheney?
Yeah, no problem. So let me answer this, then I got to go to Dan Hollaway. I hate it. I hate that she's on the stage with Liz Cheney and that she's embraced Dick Cheney. I think it's a terrible political strategy. I don't want anything to do with the neocons. But every time I see Kamala Harris doing something wrong, I look over to Donald Trump and he does it worse. So how can you live with Donald?
There were no wars,
hold on, let me explain.
no new wars during Donald Trump's presidency.
I know. You guys love that talking point, except for the fact that right now, Donald Trump, when asked about the Middle East and Israel, he said they should immediately bomb Iran, and he's going to pay for it. He's going to make us fight for that war, fight that war. So he is actively more pro-war than Kamala Harris. It's always damned if we do, damned if we don't.
No. Actions speak way louder than words, unless you're voting emotionally. When Donald Trump was president, there were no new foreign wars. He ended foreign wars.
Sure.
Under the Biden-Harris administration, we are spending, what is it, $175 billion? He's
going to make us pay for all those wars, and you know
$175 billion to Ukraine.
Are you saying he's not going to make us pay for Israel's war? Are you saying that he's not going to make us pay for
I think that there's cognitive dissonance that you pivot to Israel instead of looking at what Kamala Harris is doing with Ukraine. I mean, does that not bother you?
It's the exact topic we were talking about. Okay, I got to go. Liz, thank you for doing it. I appreciate it. It was a good conversation.
Thanks, Cenk.
We should do it again sometime. Everybody check out Liz Wheeler. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Dan Hollaway from Drinkin Bros is up next, but we got to get him on. So I will read some of your comments as we do the transition, as we get folks on. We're a little bit late to get to Dan. So Stellar Wingman asked on Twitch, Trump says he wants to suspend the Constitution. Does Liz believe him? Look, we'll ask that of several folks here as we go. Steve Button on Super Chat says, I canvassed for Harris today. She's not my first choice, but we have two directions we could go in as a country. I'm supporting the less painful one. Steve speaks for me, and so you'll see that in these conversations. I'm not a rah-rah guy on establishment Democrats, and I think a lot of people know that about me and about the Young Turks. But when Donald Trump says we should terminate the Constitution, it kind of ends the conversation for me, and I think it should for conservative voters and for MAGA guys. I'm a little disappointed that it doesn't, but I'm constantly disappointed on both sides. Crystal says her point is invalid. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has ruled that ballots can be sent via drop boxes. 4-3 reversal in this summer on their earlier decision. I looked it up. You're welcome, Liz. That is pretty good. She did ask for you to look it up. You did look it up. That's an instant fact check by our audience. Appreciate you, Crystal. I don't want to debate Liz when she's not here, but that's not me. That is the audience fact checking as she requested. Balk says Biden won fair and square. Of course he did. And so that's another giant issue as to why Donald Trump's a problem. All right, now joining us is Dan Hollaway. He's 1/3 of the popular podcast and YouTube channel Drinkin Bros. It's also at drinkinbros.com. So they've got content, they do tours, they've got a store there. And Dan also served in the US Army between 2005 and 2010. And so, and he's was VP of marketing at Black Rifle Coffee Company too. Dan, welcome, brother.
Thanks for having me. I like what you're doing here.
No problem. So first of all, you got Black Rifle Coffee. We got Too Strong Coffee. So thinking along similar lines. And thank you for your service to the country too.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. All right, Dan. So tell me why you're voting for Donald Trump, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. So we could talk about immigration, inflation, crime, and dumb foreign policy decisions like Iran and Afghanistan and stuff. But I feel like most of your other guests are probably going to speak to those issues. So I want to talk about something a little bit more institutional. I'm voting for Trump because all the people who have driven this country into the ground, some of whom you and I will agree on, hate him and want to stop him. Something I like to say a lot, and something that you can see all through human history and politics, is that the aristocracy will always protect itself before it'll protect any particular person or political party or ideology. They are what I consider to be political nihilists, and they see politics and their regimes as, anointed by nature, God, or whatever. Just like people that were born in the purple 2,000 years ago, they think they deserve it. Just like Hillary used to say, or people like to say about her, that it's her turn. That's nonsense, you know. So the people that were responsible for all of our debt and sending us to die in these pointless wars, responsible for killing JFK, you know, for 60 years of foreign policy blunders, they hate him. They hate Trump. And the question then to me is why? Because I'm not the typical MAGA person. I kind of read things as they come along. I voted very disparately over the years. To me, Trump is a threat to their ability to extract labor and wealth from the US population. All systems of government, to some degree, if left unchecked, will become an engine rather to extract labor and wealth from the population. No system scales indefinitely. That's why our founders in their wisdom designed a system of a federalist republic where power goes back to the states, right? 9th and 10th Amendments. Because even they knew at 2.5 million people at the time this would never scale indefinitely. And I want to get into exactly how this aristocracy has broken us as a country over the years. And this is nonpartisan, by the way.
Yeah.
You talk all the time and have for years about the need to get money out of politics. If you stop there, it's just a platitude. So let's discuss why it's important to get money out of politics. Since Reagan, we've deregulated quite a bit, which, you know, people on my side would like. In principle, from a conservative perspective, it's good. But then we started choosing sides and allowing certain industries to monopolize where others couldn't. Clinton doubled down on this. We went from between Clinton coming into office in '92 and Obama in 2014, we went from 100 military industrial complex companies serving the vast majority of the DoD's needs down to just 5, right? And they're disparate. They all provide different products, so there's no competition. And then we allowed under Bush, excuse me, I lost my place there. Under Bush, we allowed Whirlpool to buy Maytag. And what that did was create a situation where Whirlpool controlled 75% of the home appliance market, a super majority, right?
Yep.
And then also during Bush, we went from 6 mobile phone companies to 4. We go between Bush and Obama, we go from 20 airlines to 4, and all this stuff happens. So why do we have flat wages and increasing costs? Because of Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. Now, the last 3 support Kamala Harris. Why? Because they did this on purpose, my opinion. They did it on purpose. They deregulated not to inspire creativity and growth like we're supposed to, but to choose sides and create monopolies, duopolies, and oligopolies so their friends can get richer and richer and use the money from that to fund their political campaigns. Now, here's another reason why I know it was on purpose. Citizens United in 2010, which you've talked about quite a bit, this happened, right? One of the worst things that's ever happened in this country, in my opinion. And then with a supermajority in 2011, enough to pass the Affordable Care Act, the left did nothing to stop it. Right? This is not a right versus left issue. It is an aristocracy versus the rest of us issue. Yeah. Now,
so Dan,
that's the first way.
Let me jump in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I love almost everything you're saying, and you sound like a progressive, and that's because we're both populists. You're a populist from the right, I'm populist from the left, but we agree probably on a tremendous number of things, and I agree with everything you said minus Trump, right? And I'll explain why. So, but you're absolutely right. They're going towards monopoly power because that gives them more control over the American population, and more control over prices. We live under corporate rule, and the establishment of both the Republican and the Democratic Party enforce that corporate rule. So God bless your brother. You say defund politicians on your shirt. I like that shirt. Okay, I formed Wolfpack to get money out of politics, and I didn't do it as Johnny Come Lately. I did it back in 2011. So we've been doing it for 13 years. Everybody go check out wolf-pack.com. Okay, and it's nonpartisan, and both right and left saying enough of the donors controlling our politicians. So why do these guys hate Trump? And I get it. That is actually, in my experience, that is the #1 reason why MAGA likes Trump. Not necessarily, they like some portions of Trump, and MAGA's complicated. It's not one monolith, right? But of all the different factions, et cetera, the #1 reason is the establishment hates him, so I like him. Right, and so I get that. I understand that.
Well, it's not that simple though. It's why the establishment hates him that matters. It's not that they hate him. I don't care about that.
That's where you and I part ways, Dan. Because here's my theory on why the establishment hates him. The establishment has this great little system they've set up where they're robbing us blind. I call it the Great American Robbery, right? But they have a system where they share it all. All the donors get what they wanted, and sometimes within an industry they'll compete, et cetera. To bribe the politicians to their side. I wrote an example about that in Justice is Coming, my book, etc. But overall, the reason they hated Trump was because he had that same systemic corruption, did everything that his donors wanted, but he layered on top of that personal corruption. And they're like, whoa, 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 you're not allowed to just steal for yourself. You're supposed to be working for us and helping us steal. This guy's in it for himself too. No, we don't like that. And the second reason they don't like it is because it creates instability. Because he's a wild man, he's out of control. So he'll do these things that creates instability in the markets, and they don't like that. So it's not that it's because, oh wow, he's such a warrior against the establishment. So Dan, that's why I call out Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, all those guys 24/7. I drive the Democrats crazy. But when I see you guys and you can't see Trump's massive corruption, it drives me out of my mind. So when he says, well, Sheldon Adelson gave me a lot of money, so I moved the embassy in Israel, for our embassy in Israel for him. Well, brother, you're not supposed to admit that. That's just outright bribery. Sheldon Adelson gave him $100 million in 2016 and 2020. Now his wife, Miriam Adelson, is giving him $90 million. And so and when he gets endorsements, he'll say, Elon Musk gave me a strong endorsement. So I was against electric vehicles, now I'm for electric vehicles. Jeff Yazd is 15% owner of TikTok. And Trump wanted to ban TikTok. Jeff Yazd gives him a couple $1 million campaign contribution. Who says, well, he gave me a strong endorsement, so now I'm in favor of TikTok. So doesn't that obvious, blatant corruption bother you?
Yeah, anything like that bothers me. I mean, a lot of things about Trump bother me. As a matter of fact, the way he handled COVID and all that stuff bothers a lot of people on the right, I think. But this idea that when you say he creates instability, he didn't create it for me or my employees. They were doing great then, right? The people that are struggling to put food on the table right now did not feel unstable during the Trump administration. Maybe the people who are buried in Twitter and media all the time, who only see the red flags and red alarms going off all the time and don't actually live in reality, maybe they felt that way, but the markets were stable. We weren't dealing with a situation in Iran. It's funny, people like to project this idea of instability onto Trump because he is a little bit chaotic in the way he delivers information, for sure. I actually don't have a problem with that necessarily. I think he could clean it up a little bit, but let's get past it. The thing that people care about is their ability to put food on their table, right? That's what was interrupted, and it tickles me. It really does when people talk about instability from Trump. Here are the facts. In the early part of the 2000s, Russia got aggressive and went into Georgia under Bush, and then Russia gets aggressive again under Obama and takes Crimea, and then they get aggressive again with Biden and go into Ukraine, but they didn't do a thing. It was crickets during Trump's administration. And somehow that translates into Trump as a Russian asset. Trump's chaotic. I don't remember my friends getting sent to die in wars under Donald Trump. And I do remember them getting sent to die in wars under everybody else on that list. So this idea that you're saying about instability, I just don't think that there's any data to back that up, frankly.
Yeah, so the instability in a couple of ways. I hear what you're saying, like during the 3 years before COVID, like the country didn't explode. Every day he would threaten to do some other crazy thing, but overall, in my opinion, as much as I hate the establishment, they served as a useful break for Donald Trump whenever he suggested something insane that didn't make any sense. So he'd say, okay, let's bring out the military and shoot protesters in the street. Well, I thought you were for freedom of speech. Those guys are protesting, that's a First Amendment right. And now you're talking about shooting them. And the generals would say, no, sir, we're not going to bring the military to shoot American citizens. So that partly led to some sort of balancing act that he's not going to have this time around because he's not bringing any of those guys in. So when I talk about instability, number one, using the military to shoot protesters is unstable, but luckily they prevented that. Second of all, he says things like, don't worry about the debt ceiling. We don't have to lift the debt ceiling. No, if you don't lift the debt ceiling, our full faith and credit of the dollar is questioned. Our credit rating goes in the toilet. The interest rates spike. Inflation goes out of control, the deficit goes out of control. Again, the establishment tackled him on that and didn't let him do that. But I'm deeply worried that if there's no one to tackle him, that he's gonna do these crazy things. I mean, and on the wars, right now he's saying, let's bomb Iran. So you guys keep saying that he doesn't mean anything he says, but I think he does, and I think people try super hard to contain him.
Maybe he does.
And I'm worried that if he does the things he says, it's going to be an epic disaster.
Sure. I mean, look, that's a I like that you went there, because we're talking about real instability versus hypothetical instability. We have real instability now. We have multiple wars going on all over the place. We do have high inflation. I think 3 times what was under Trump, and the inflation with food and energy is quite a bit worse than even just the currency inflation. Now, it's again that is an interesting position to take, because you're juxtaposing hypothetical instability from somebody who in Trump's mind, and I know you know this, he thinks these are negotiation tactics. Like, hey, I'll fire you if you don't do this, or I'll do this if you don't do this. In his brain, that works well. And frankly, the results were pretty positive. I think you would have to agree. North Korea tamed a little bit. Iran, as he likes to say, was broke or whatever. I mean, these things were handled. And, look, I to some degree would agree with you that I would like him to tone it down with the rhetoric a little bit. Like, there's been a couple of examples that have leaked out through the press over the years where he handled it beautifully, right? Talking to the Taliban commander. I'm sure you've heard this story. When we're making this deal to pull out of Afghanistan, he's like, here's your house, I'll blow it up if you even do anything, or whatever, right? Some of the threats he made to Xi Jinping behind the scenes, that's how it's done, right? Now, he just likes to do it on Twitter sometimes, which is not what I would do, but that's what he's doing. Now, you brought up another interesting point, which is, some of these about the debt ceiling and such, and how it might affect U.S. currency globally. Well, BRICS is affecting U.S. currency globally in reality. So again, I'm going to come back to this. You're talking about hypothetical stuff that could be caused by Trump, but never has, including the 4 years he was in the presidency, versus stuff that is actually happening right now under the Biden-Harris administration. That seems like an odd comparison to me.
So Dan, I'm going to ask you a super important question at the end of this, but part of my point is that I don't think you guys are seeing the stuff that he actually is doing. It's papered over. So for example, you said North Korea was fine. North Korea wasn't fine. They built 6 to 8 nuclear weapons under Trump. So he huffed and puffed and said, my button's bigger and I'm gonna get you and I'm gonna do all these things. Kim Jong-un said, oh, I like your hair. And he's like, that's it, we're in love. Go ahead, build a nuke. So he didn't actually do the thing that he said he was going to do, which is prevent them from building nukes. I think that's a super tough question because I don't want him attacking North Korea either, right? So I get that it's a complicated situation. And in one case in Iran, where the generals asked him to bomb one more time and he didn't, I gave him all the credit in the world. You go back and watch the Young Turks tapes on it. I said, now that was a good move. But outside of that, all he did was agitate for war with Iran. He killed their top general. For what reason? For what reason? He pulled us out of the nuclear deal.
For what reason? I'm sorry, Cenk, we're 2 days past the anniversary of the 1983 Beirut bombings. Soleimani was the mastermind of that. Hundreds of Marines were killed.
Okay, let me ask you, Dan, real talk. Do you think Trump did that
let me finish the thought first.
20, 30
Hundreds of
years
Marines were killed.
Vengeance?
Soleimani was also the architect between the alliance between the Sunni and Shia militias that we've been fighting in Lebanon and Syria for years. He's been at this for decades, longer than some of the people in this room right now with me have been alive. He deserved to die, and I'm glad he's dead. The end.
Dan,
what are we talking about here?
No, we're not arguing about the value of whether Soleimani was a bad guy or not. Saddam was also a bad guy. That didn't mean we should have gone to Iraq and lost all those guys and lost trillions of dollars. So yeah, I don't need to be convinced that
don't project that onto me. I actually went there, so I don't want to hear that nonsense. Like, no, we should not have gone to Iraq.
Exactly.
100% agree with that.
But Dan, that's my point.
But that wasn't Trump. That was George W. Bush and all the people that support Kamala Harris now, right? Dick Cheney and his family that support Kamala Harris now. I mean, those are the people that took us to Iraq, not Trump.
Okay, so Dan, I want to get to the next person as well. So I want to end on this. But so you see what I'm saying? Look, it doesn't matter that Saddam Hussein was a terrible guy and Soleimani's a terrible guy. What matters is why did he kill him? And what are the consequences of killing him? Killing him threatened to start a giant regional war. And he wasn't doing it for payback from 30 years ago. He was doing it because Israel wanted him to do it. So he risked a war for Israel. Then moving our embassy also risked the war. Now, we got lucky and we didn't get that war, except we didn't get lucky. It just prevented we did get that war just a little bit later. And so he got lucky by not being in office, but he agitated and agitated and agitated. And now he's saying bomb Iran. He keeps doing all of these aggressive actions against Iran. It doesn't matter that they're bad guys. The question is, do we want to get into a war with a country that is 4 times the size of Iraq? And for what? It has nothing to do with American interests. It's only because Netanyahu wants it. He is not.
Well,
the
that's not true, though.
guy
Again,
you
Jing,
think
that's
he
not
is.
true. So, once again, we're dealing in hypotheticals. It could have happened, but it didn't. It didn't.
But it
didn't
did
under
happen.
Trump,
It just
and
happened
it did
after
under. I'm
his
sorry.
watch.
It didn't. It didn't happen though. It didn't happen. That's the
October
whole point.
7th happened.
And you talk about like I'll say this about Iran. I don't think we should be getting involved in any kind of ground war with Iran. And you can look this up, and I encourage you to do so. I know you like to do research on stuff like this. Lloyd's of London right now, as of today, is insuring about $50 million worth of cargo through the Suez Canal every single day. Right? 10 years ago, it was $150 million every single day. The Houthi rebels, this little Iranian cutout of a couple of thousand dudes who don't have shoes, have been able to slow global trade by 2/3. We have to do something about that. As a matter of fact, the Constitution demands it. The Constitution only authorizes a Navy. It doesn't authorize a standing army or any of this other stuff. It authorizes a Navy to protect U.S. interests abroad, to protect particularly transport and shipping, right? This is what the purpose of U.S. power is. Thomas Jefferson would love me for saying this, by the way, because he created it. This is the entire purpose of the U.S. military, is to protect the homeland, not do all this foreign war nonsense, but protect the homeland and protect U.S. shipping interests overseas. If we're going to do business over there, right? If we're going to do business in that area, us and our partners, I don't care about, look, that Israel stuff isn't going to land with me. I don't give a shit about Israel. I only care about my own country. Couldn't care less about anybody else, right? But a little group of people that can't afford shoes can't slow down global trade by 2/3. We cannot allow that.
So
Something
Dan,
has to be done about it.
Last thing, I think that you guys are getting played. I think that the reason we're in a battle with the Houthis and the reason we're in a battle with Iran is all because of Israel. And I think that Donald Trump is going to serve Israel just like he did the first time, because he got literally $300 million to serve Israel. And so my question to you, last question is, if I am right, and he does exactly what Netanyahu wants, and we get embroiled in a giant war in the Middle East, are you going to hold him accountable, or are you going to be a cheerleader?
I don't cheerlead for anybody. You can see it on my shirt. By the way, if you want this shirt, you can find it on drinkinbros.com. I invented it. But my loyalty is to the United States and the Constitution. This idea that individual liberty and personal entrepreneurship are the ultimate inoculation against tyrannical bullshit. That's who we are in this country, right? That's what I care about. I don't cheerlead for any candidate. Politicians, to me, that doesn't matter, right? What matters is the Constitution and first principles. And I recommend everybody go out there and learn a little bit about that.
So Dan, if Trump wins and he disappoints you, as I think he's going to, both on war and the economy and on corruption, I hope you come back and we lead a populist revolt against, by the way, either him or Kamala Harris. So, only if they disappoint. And I hope to God that you're objective about it. And by the way, I'll do if Trump doesn't get us in any wars, doesn't do giant corporate tax cuts and giant giveaway trillions of dollars and giveaways to the rich, etc., I'm super happy. But he's gonna do that. He did a giant corporate tax cut before. He threatened war 1 billion times. He plays with fire. I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm right, I hope that you come back and say, yeah, let's do a populist revolt together. All right?
Yeah, I'm in. I'll fight anybody for this country.
There you go. All right, Dan Hollaway, really appreciate the conversation, brother. And no question, you got
sir.
good intent, and I appreciate it. All right, so everybody check out Drinkin' Bros. We're gonna talk to Amanda Peterson next. She's with College Republicans, so that's a fun little twist. We've got so many others coming up later. Will Chamberlain, Jesse Merl, who's Jesse on Fire on YouTube. We got Mike Lindell coming up a little bit later. So a ton of folks. Let me read some comments as we get the next person on, and that's Amanda. Pixel Fun Gaming wrote in on Super Chat, US military personnel were injured because of Trump's assassination of an Iranian general. There's also the failed Yemen raid approved by Trump that got a Navy SEAL killed. Yeah, he does all this militaristic stuff. People will see what they want to see. Blue MAGA thought that Joe Biden was young and dynamic. Trump did more drone strikes, agitated for war in 800 different ways. And Red MAGA's like, no, I don't see it. I don't see it. Antares wrote in, Trump gave us the Ukraine war. He tactically set up Ukraine for attack when he said he would pull out of NATO, divided our population, extorted Zelensky. That gave Putin 3 birds to hit with 1 stone. I hear you on that. I think that Biden also has some responsibility for that, because they kept bringing NATO closer and closer to Russia. I like NATO. I hate that Russia invaded Ukraine. At the same time, we didn't need to agitate Russia by bringing NATO right to their doorstep. But you're right about Trump too. I love honest people that can call out BS on both sides. All right, let's go to Amanda Peterson. She's former chair of Minnesota College Republicans in 2016, and she's worked on multiple races since then. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So Amanda, what animates you most in favor of Donald Trump? Why are you out there to make sure he wins?
I think that Donald Trump speaks to the issues that voters care most about and have cared most about: the economy, crime, immigration. Kamala Harris has overseen the destruction of a lot of those issues in America, and I think that the media has allowed her to get away with it. The media won't allow Trump to get away with things in the same way.
So let's take those one at a time. I'm glad we finally got there. So let's talk about inflation. So I'm curious whether you acknowledge these facts. So and people see me, whether it's in these conversations / debates or in the Young Turks regularly, calling out both sides, right? So, but on the issue of inflation, you recognize that there was worldwide inflation. It was partly because of COVID, partly we printed too much money, partly supply chain issues, et cetera. So it was worldwide. It's not like Joe Biden caused the entire world to have inflation. Secondly, do you acknowledge that America contained inflation better than almost any other country on earth?
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, so since that's true, we could say, oh my God, there was inflation under Joe Biden, but if we're being fair, he actually did contain it better than the rest of the world did.
Well, I think that Americans don't care if it's better than the rest of the G7 countries. At the end of the day, inflation is a gut issue. If Americans are having a harder time paying for groceries, paying their rent, they don't care that we're having it a little bit better off than France and the UK. They want something to be fixed in the United States. And again, the media has largely ignored this, as has Joe Biden. They just keep telling people over and over again, well, but the stock market's doing well. Okay, great. So people who own stocks are doing better. That's not helping with the price of groceries.
No, I totally agree with that. But then when Kamala Harris says, okay, well then if they're price gouging in the middle of an emergency situation, whether it's normally under a natural disaster, but in that case, out of control inflation because of supply chain issues, et cetera, well, I'm gonna prevent them from profit taking, not making a profit overall, but taking extra profit during that time. And you see the corporate CEOs bragging in their shareholder meetings, oh, the consumers didn't have a choice, so we jacked up prices more. They're bragging about it because they brought more profits to their company, but they did do that. So when Kamala Harris says, and not that I believe her, but she says she would stop that, isn't that a positive proposal?
I don't think so. I don't think that any economist on the right or left thinks that price controls are a good way to.
No, she didn't say price controls. No, I'm against price controls.
Well, the Washington Post came out. Well, the Washington Post came out and said that this could lead to price controls. But the other thing is, why don't the Democrats, why doesn't Kamala Harris have specific instances to point to? Why don't they have evidence? If there was evidence, that would be all over Democrat campaign mailers, that this company price gouged by 20%, 10%, whatever it is. She's not come up with any of that. It's a very vague proposal.
Yeah, Amanda, the reason they don't.
And I haven't seen evidence that it's happening.
No, it's look, we've shown it on the Young Turks many times. A great number of CEOs in their shareholder calls saying we jacked it up because we could, right? Not in those exact words, but close. The reason why Kamala Harris doesn't bring that up is because she's trying to raise money from those same companies. So if you want to point out her hypocrisy, I'm right there with you, right? But in terms of like, oh, it didn't happen. No, it definitely happened. I mean, that's part of what led to inflation. Not the whole reason why we had inflation, but at least it's a proposal. So, I mean, I'm damning with faint praise here, but at least she says, okay, here's what I would do about it. What would Trump do about it? Because Trump keeps saying, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen under me. Okay, yeah, but brother, inflation was here worldwide, and I don't see a single proposal by Donald Trump on what to do with inflation. So what's his proposal?
Well, I think he said that he'll take care of energy prices, and I think that energy prices have a lot to do with it. I also think that one of the biggest causes of inflation was when Biden came into office, he proposed a $6 trillion spending bill. Republicans got him down to $4 trillion. Spending bills like that probably won't happen under Trump. They won't be able to pass in the same way. And all of that extra cash running around and being spent is what led to more inflation.
Yeah, so let me address that in two different ways. Number one, you're right that there was a good number of dollars added to the debt under Joe Biden, over $4 trillion, about $4.2 trillion, I believe. So do you know how much Donald Trump added to the debt?
A lot as well, but a lot of that was spending due to COVID.
Nope, 8.4 trillion. And so it doubled Joe Biden in terms of how much he added to the debt. And yes, some of it was under COVID, so was Joe Biden's. So when you subtract the COVID spending both under Trump and Biden, Trump still doubled it. And the reason he doubled it is because of giant corporate giveaways. So we just talked about corporations and you say, oh, we've got to bring inflation down. But the guys who partly created inflation, Donald Trump loves and gave giant tax cuts to. That's $2 trillion tax cut out of our pockets and into their pockets. So I don't see how that helps. And then you mentioned, of all the different things that you could do about inflation, the one thing you mentioned was energy prices. First of all, oil and gas was not, it was affected by inflation. Their prices also went up. We all hate it. You're right, we should all address it, right? But we're at record production. We're #1 in the world in energy production right now. So, and the oil companies are giant donors to Donald Trump. He keeps saying his only proposal to reduce inflation is to deregulate the oil companies and give them more tax cuts. How would tax cuts to ExxonMobil, one of the richest corporations in the world, help us fight inflation?
I think tax cuts creates like any cutting of regulation would create a better economy. I mean, one of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, Elon Musk, agrees with that. And at the end of the day, Americans felt like the economy was better under Trump by double-digit margins.
They felt that way, but we just discussed that.
Right, but the economy is a gut issue. If they feel that way, I don't think the American people are stupid in feeling that way. They don't feel that same way about Kamala Harris.
Yeah, no, it's a nice little rhetorical trick to say, even though it's not true, people feel that it's true, and so, and they must be right. No, the American people are often misled by mainstream media, right-wing media. There's 100 reasons why. And you're arguing for corporate tax cuts here and deregulation, but for example, conservative we had on, Dan Hollaway, before you, would argue that helping corporations and deregulating doesn't help at all. In fact, he just said it creates monopolies, and he's totally right. And monopoly power leads to things like inflation, because then consumers don't have a choice. There's only one place they can go to, or two places they can go to in an oligopoly, and that way corporations get to rule over us all. So I don't see how helping corporations brings down inflation. I think that.
What has Kamala Harris done to break up corporations and monopolies?
Actually, Biden has a lot of issues, but one of the things he's been really good on is fighting monopolies through Lina Khan. And in fact, J.D. Vance even praises Lina Khan. So you picked the wrong place to criticize Biden and Harris, because that's a place where they're so good, even J.D. Vance agrees.
Well, I don't know that J.D. Vance agrees with them, but maybe on that one particular person. He's complimented her.
No, his labor relation board is excellent, Joe Biden's, and he's been great on trying to fight monopolies. The rest, he serves corporate donors just like every other politician does. But at least he did that stuff, and Trump is saying, I don't want to do that. I want to deregulate corporations so we can have even more corporate rule. So this is the same theme I keep coming back to with all the folks that we're talking to today. I don't think you guys are getting what you think you're getting. So he's going to give tax cuts to corporations. He's going to deregulate them. They're going to have way more power over our lives than they do today. So if he does that, then will you be upset with him? Or do you say, no, good. I want corporations to have more power, more deregulation, more tax cuts?
I think that there's a weird stereotype here where if things are better for corporations, they're going to get worse for the American people. If corporations get tax cuts, they can hire more people. There's more money floating around the economy. I don't think that is bad for the American people. Yeah,
so what wound up happening is that was the theory that Donald Trump had. He said he came in, there was about a $20 trillion deficit at debt at that point. And he said, I'm gonna wipe away the 20 trillion. It's gonna be gone. I'm the king of debt, I know what to do with it. Yeah, he added 8.4 to it, because the tax cuts never work. It's always a trick to say, oh, well, let's give everything to corporations first, and maybe it'll trickle down to us. Well, it didn't. We had massive deficits, massive debt, and corporations got everything and we didn't. So.
Well, they didn't get everything because the majority of the tax cuts went to the middle class.
Oh no, that's not remotely true. The tax cuts that went to the middle class have an expiration point. The tax cuts that went to corporations do not have an expiration point. They're permanent. So 80 to 90% of those gigantic multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts in the long run go to corporate America. They do not go to the average guy. The average guy is sprinkled in there in tax cuts to give the appearance of, oh, I'm giving you something. In reality, it's a Trojan horse to do trillions of dollars in giveaways to corporations. Look, I wish the Democrats wouldn't do it. I wish the Republicans wouldn't do it. I wish Trump wouldn't do it. But at least I'm consistent on it. I don't want it under any circumstance. But Amanda, I appreciate you. I appreciate the conversation. And thank you for at least bringing up those points to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go to Will Chamberlain next. He's senior counsel to the Internet Accountability Project and also editor-in-chief of Human Events. We're getting him on right now. Let me go to more super chats here. So Red Eye makes an interesting populist point on super chat. He says this right versus left divide isn't helping anyone. We need a new party for the people, not corporate America. Here, brother. In fact, make sure you're watching Young Turks on election night and election day, because we're going to start at noon Eastern and we're going to go to probably around 4 a.m. So, and one of the things I'm going to do on election day is I'm going to reveal a new populist agenda. And what I want, as I mentioned in some of the interviews and debates here, is that we do a populist revolt whether Kamala Harris or Donald Trump wins. Because look, guys, they're all in bed with their donors. They're going to do exactly what their donors asked them to do. So we need a populist revolt against both of them. So make sure you come back to Young Turks on YouTube on election day. And by the way, today we got a 20% off if you want to become a member, especially if you've not seen the show before. This is different than any other show. This is not a normal left-right situation here. Definitely not a Democrat or Republican thing. So tyt.com/2024 to become a member or to contribute. All right, Will Chamberlain joins us now, senior counsel to the Internet Accountability Project and the owner and editor-in-chief of Human Events. Will, welcome.
Thanks. Former on that one, I sold it.
Oh, okay, former.
Times with breaks.
Okay, well, God bless. Capitalism, baby. So, Will, tell me why you're supporting Donald Trump.
Well, I start with something I would call the Cheney Kristol power deprivation principle, which is the idea that voting to deprive Bill Kristol and the Cheney family of power is good, and that we should try and do that. And I think the only way to effectively do that in this election is to vote for Donald Trump. So that's, I think, the first principle we can talk about. I think foreign policy is the most important thing you should look at when you're talking about a presidential vote, just because they have more power over foreign policy than they do everything else. I think Trump delivered 4 years of actually pretty solid foreign policy. No new wars, new peace agreements in the Middle East. Russia seemingly contained. And I think that foreign policy has been an absolute disaster under Biden-Harris, and I expect it to get much worse, in particular under a Harris administration, who might well make Liz Cheney Secretary of Defense, which is just unthinkable and something I think is just a first imperative to avoid. So I think we can start there. There's domestic reasons too, obviously. I agree with President Trump's policies on immigration, crime, energy, for example. Right. But I think foreign policy trumps those.
Okay, so let's start with Cheney and Kristol. So I'm both gratified that the Republican base has moved and also amused and frustrated. So, Young Turks has been around forever. We are the longest lasting internet show in history, started 22 years ago. So we were around before the Iraq War, and we were one of only 2 national shows that were against the Iraq War. And every Republican said, oh, it's gonna go great, it's gonna be great. We love Dick Cheney, we love Bill Kristol. Now you guys disown them as if you didn't do it. No, it was you guys. Okay, so that's point one. But I'm glad that you guys have moved. God bless, okay? Now, the fact that they're moving towards Kamala Harris is deeply disturbing to me. So I'm not gonna fight you on that at all, okay? So now, having said that, brother, you're saying that Trump is not for Cheney and Kristol's overall strategy, but he just said to bomb Iran. So he sounds like the neocons who were saying bomb Iran. So John McCain wanted to attack Iran, Netanyahu wanted to attack Iran, and now Trump is saying, yeah, hit their nuclear facilities. He took us out of the nuclear deal. They wouldn't have had any nuclear facilities if we just stayed in the deal. So he creates this giant problem. He agitates, he kills Soleimani, he does endless drone strikes, and then he goes, oh, golly gee, they're upset. Now we gotta fight them more, and now we gotta bomb them. So that just looks like Dick Cheney 2.0 to me.
Oh, I don't think so. I think there are some important distinctions that I think you're missing in that one. So first, he didn't argue for us to strike Iran. He said that if Israel's going to do it, go ahead and hit the nuclear sites. And there's a reason he said that. I mean, not really. I mean, Israel, like we pay for a fraction of Israel's military capability, but Israel's defending itself pretty well using a lot of its own domestic capability. And honestly, Israel doesn't really need our military aid except in like the very short term to restock things like Iron Dome. But I would say, I think that
Will, hold on. So I don't like interrupting, but I got to challenge you on that. We just gave them $26 billion, and before that we gave them $4 billion. That's $30 billion. So do you think Trump's going to cut that aid? Do you think he should cut that aid? Because I think he should. Why are we paying them to start a war with Iran?
I mean, I'm sort of indifferent to it. I think I don't think Trump will cut it. But I think the broader point is that like why is Israel thinking about striking Iran? Well, Iran launched 200 ballistic missiles at it. I mean, which is a really aggressive attack on another sovereign state. I would be shocked if Israel didn't want to defend itself and retaliate in a similar way. Now, does that mean I'm sitting here being like the Americans, we should do what Bill Kristol wanted to do in 2004, follow up the Iraq War, the Iran War? No, obviously not. But I'm not going to sit here. And I think also Donald Trump went on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, like just on Friday, and he was saying, no, we shouldn't be doing a regime change in Iran. They're going to have to figure it out on their own. I want Iran to have a great future. I'm not going to reinstall the Shah. They just can't have a nuclear weapon, which I don't think that this is the sort of hyper aggressive policy. And you're trying to create like, well, they're basically going to be the same on Iran. And I don't think that's true. And I don't think that's true, especially not if Liz Cheney is Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State.
Okay, first of all, Tim Walz said that she definitely won't be. I'm not saying I believe him, okay? So we'll see. But so having said that, brother, you sound again like the Republicans I fought back in 2002. They said, well, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but Saddam has weapons of mass destruction, and it could be, by the time we find out, it could be a mushroom cloud over America, and oh my God, we gotta do it. So Iran and Israel keep having tit for tat, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the underlying problem, in my opinion, if we're gonna get into that issue, is it's not even my opinion, it's obvious, it's the occupation. 57 years of a brutal occupation of the Palestinians, and then they go, what? I don't know why people are upset with us. That's why people are upset with you. But that's their business, not our business. But you're saying in the new Dick Cheney neoconservative outlook of Donald Trump, we should make it our business and we should finance that war. And by the way, Biden, and I criticize him for this, brought a giant portion of our military, including our soldiers, over there to get hit. So then when they get hit, Will, what are you going to say? You're going to say, oh, there was nothing we could do. We got hit. Now we have to fight this war for Israel, right?
Well, I mean, actually, I disagree. I think we should be taking our troops out of Iraq, for example. Like, I think it's the Biden administration's policy of leaving our troops to sit as sitting ducks in random little bases in Iraq and Syria is crazy. We're not willing to defend those people, and it's just irresponsible to leave them there. I think that's deeply immoral.
So pull the aircraft carriers out of the Gulf and let Israel deal with Iran?
Well, that's different. I mean, I don't mind having these aircraft carriers, and I think that one of the smarter moves Biden actually did, and I'll give him some credit for this. I thought moving the aircraft carrier to like the Mediterranean in the aftermath of October 7th to attempt to deter Hezbollah was a perfectly reasonable thing to do in terms of trying to prevent the expansion of this into a broader war. I mean, it didn't work long term in the sense of Hezbollah decided that it was just going to keep rocketing northern Israel for over a year, but it was a smart move in the short term to try and keep things contained to Gaza.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing is I don't want anything to do with Israel's war, and I don't want to finance it, and I don't want to get our guys killed. And you're saying, yeah, but maybe we should, and maybe we should help them, bomb them, and then hope that we don't get embroiled in a gigantic war in the Middle East. I don't like that hope.
Let's frame it kind of a different way. I don't think the sort of foreign policy that you're looking for is on offer in this election from either the Harris side or the Trump side. But what I will say is,
you know what? I agree with that. So I'll agree with that. And I don't like the direction Kamala Harris is going. But what I can't stomach is people pretending Trump is anti-war. We just agreed they both would do the same thing. They both would finance the war. They're both agitating for war. So, okay, yeah, as long as we're agreed on that, I agree. But don't say that he's anti-war when he isn't anti-war.
Well, I mean, I think he's walking into a situation where there already is a war and trying to figure out what the best way to resolve it is. And I was going to make this point, which I think this is an interesting problem with what happens when Democrats find themselves talking out of both sides of their mouths on particular issues. It happens with Israel and it happens with the border, and I'll explain. So the policy of Trump would be, well, Israel should simply defeat Gaza, Hamas, and Hezbollah quickly. And the policy of the Harris administration is, well, they should defeat them, but like more slowly and in a slightly more restrained fashion. And it's not clear at all that that's actually an improvement for the people who live in the region. Like if you think about if the policy is ultimately going to be, even if you're coming at it from a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel perspective, if the American policy is going to be Israel wins, and the question is Israel wins quickly or slowly, it's better for the people who live there if Israel simply wins quickly. And you actually got the worst of all worlds when you sort of play this tap dance with Israel, where you're like trying to restrain them from very specific tactics, sort of, kind of, and just letting the war drag on for a year, and everybody has to be, eating MREs and living in tents. I think the people of Gaza would be much better off if the choice is on offer, even from a pro-Palestinian perspective, are win quickly or win slowly. Wars that end quickly are generally better for the people in the war zone.
Last two things, and I want to switch to energy that you mentioned. Just real quick, my points on this are: I'm not pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli or anti-Israeli. I just want peace. I want them to have two states, stop killing each other, and us paying for them killing each other. So it's not an anti-Israel position at all. I think Israel is way better off if they do peace deals and actually get to peace instead of the endless wars that Netanyahu gives them. And they're killing them quick. Will, come on, man. I mean, slaughtering the Palestinians quicker and slaughtering the Lebanese quicker is not a solution here. That's not what happened. They really are attacking the actual soldiers. I mean, if you actually looked at the death toll in Gaza, it has like gone plummeted because of Israelis changing tactics. 42,000 dead at a bare minimum, let alone the people in the rubble, let alone hundreds of thousands that are injured, let alone the fact that they're starving the people in northern Gaza right now. Okay, my guess is that's not a thing you want to stay on, because that's not helpful to your campaign, in my opinion. So let's go to energy. I'm trying to help you out. Okay, so you say drill, baby, drill, but wait, we don't keep that oil. That's American oil that's under our soil, but we give it to the private companies, and they can sell all across the world. So you guys make it sound like, oh my God, that's going to help with inflation, it's going to lower prices. But it's not. It goes to a global market, so it does. Drilling more doesn't necessarily drop prices at all here in America.
I mean, basic supply and demand would suggest that it would. Even if the global price drops, then the price will drop here too. But I guess I would make another point. There's, again, trying to frame things in a way that is, friendly to the audience that I'm speaking to. There's one candidate in this race that actually has the likelihood of getting a successful carbon tax passed and has actually proposed something that is effectively analogous to a carbon tax. That's Donald Trump. You might say to me, wait, what are you talking about? Donald Trump doesn't support a carbon tax. I'm like, well, what do you think the China tariffs are? In effect, China tariffs are a carbon tax. They're just named differently.
Why?
Placing a tariff on Chinese goods makes them more expensive relative to ours, and it's effectively a way to punish them for their dirty manufacturing practices. So I think one of the things about Donald Trump's economic policy that is simultaneously liberating energy use to decrease energy prices for everybody, but then also incentivizing production to be done here at home as opposed to in China, means that the production will be done here using that energy in a much cleaner fashion under our regulations as opposed to abroad.
Yeah, lots of issues there. First of all, it's a global market, even though we're the #1 leading producer of energy. So I don't know how much more we can produce. But even so, when you add some marginal extra drilling to a gigantic global market, that is not going to move the price at all. Now, if you said, hey, keep it here in America, well, that's an interesting concept, and that would be America first, but I think Republicans would hate that. So they want to empower those oil companies. Why? They take donations from those oil companies. So they want to deregulate them, give them tax cuts, give them subsidies. This doesn't have anything to do with lower gas prices. It has to do with enriching ExxonMobil, Chevron, et cetera. And then on the tariffs, so look, I think some reasonable amount of tariffs, depending on the industry and depending on what the other country is doing, is reasonable. But Trump is offering massive tariffs, and you know that those level of tariffs will lead to inflation. So are you not concerned about that?
I think that, I don't know what he'll be able to get through Congress. Obviously, it's a give and take there. But I don't think they'll end up being massive. And moreover, I think the end result, I think the trade-off of bringing manufacturing home to the United States of critical industries is like worth the trade-off of increased prices. I think most people agree with that, because that was really the policy of Trump in his first administration. And you ended up seeing like pretty low inflation and a lot higher take-home pay for workers. And I think it was one of the first times you actually had higher take-home pay for workers in any administration in a very long time. Before that, it was, capital had been taking all the gains from, increased trade, et cetera, for a very long time, and wage growth of workers had been stagnant. So I think it's one of the many ways in which I think Donald Trump's economic policy makes sense. And I guess it connects to one final meta point, which is that, electing Donald Trump again is a way to kind of cement the populist victory over the neoconservative faction of the party. There's still sort of a lingering neoconservative remnant. Bill Kristol and Liz Cheney are over with you guys, but there are still some lingering people. In a world where Donald Trump wins again and JD Vance is the vice presidential nominee, it's the part, the battle's over and we will have won. And I think that's worth fighting for in terms of having like a party that is permanently interested in these issues in a different way.
Well, so the whole first part of this conversation was about how they're threatening for more war. So I'm not buying that, but we talked about that. But two things you just said there that's interesting. One, you said Congress will rein him in. So it's an interesting admission that he has to be reined in. Otherwise, the tariffs are way too high. And number two is we started a couple of these conversations, not necessarily with you, Will, but I'm sure that I think you might have mentioned inflation, but I had debates about inflation a little while ago. But now you just said the tariffs, and I get it. You're saying in order to help manufacturing, and that's an interesting debate, right? But it will lead to increased prices. So now we're saying Trump is going to increase inflation.
That's you do some things that will increase prices and other things that will decrease prices. I think a long-term, essentially increase in nuclear all spectrum, fuel production and having that set up for the long term will decrease energy prices, reducing inflation. And then I think tariffs and things will increase take-home pay and American production in America. I think it's you go for the combination of those two policies. It seems a lot more sensible than going just for one or the other.
Okay, I don't want to increase prices. I think that for tariffs, we should do reciprocal. If a country puts a certain amount of tariffs on us, we put a certain amount of tariffs on them. But going above and beyond starts a giant trade war, more tariffs for the entire world, all of our prices go up. By the way, also giant profit taking by some corporations in America. And some of those are Trump's donors, and conveniently. And by the way, Koch brothers are mad at him because tariffs hurt their business. But the companies that donate to Donald Trump, the tariffs help their business. So while we're having a conversation about, well, is more inflation under Trump worth it to help manufacturing? The real conversation that's happening behind the scenes is, in my opinion, both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris trying to find ways to help their donors. And that's what this is about.
I don't think so. I think that Trump's been beating the drum on tariffs and protection since before he even thought about politics, really. He's been beating the drum on that for 30 years. Same thing with like being anti-nuclear war. You can actually read some interesting articles written about him when he was in the 80s. And he's like, I really want to be handling negotiations over nuclear arms deals because I'm really worried about nuclear war. It's almost charming, I guess, like in the sense of, that he was thinking about this when there was like at the time it would have seemed like there was no chance he would have been a political figure.
Charlie and Trump is an interesting combination, but we do talk about sometimes he's funny. But Will, last thing here because we got to go to the next person. But you mentioned there that shoot, now I'm getting hungry. I forgot what you mentioned. So what was the thing you just said, Will?
I said, the nuclear war thing and being interested in.
Oh yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So you said that he has this position, but Will, that's my last question to you. He doesn't have any positions. So before he was against electric vehicles, Elon Musk gives him a lot of money. Now he's for electric vehicles. Before he wanted to ban TikTok, Jeff Yass gives him a lot of money. Now he says he's in favor of TikTok. So that he's up to the up for sale to the highest bidder. So the idea of Trump having an ideology seems kind of funny given him saying it in the rallies. He gave me a strong endorsement, so now I switched my position. He's kind of amazing the way he admits it. Isn't that obvious brazen corruption?
I don't think it's corruption. First off, there's a two-part to that question, right? Does he actually have authentic beliefs, and then is he corrupt on this other stuff, right? And so the first part is I think that Trump is like many people who has some issues he cares a lot about and some issues he doesn't really care much about at all and is just going to do the politically pragmatic thing on. And I think when you think about trade, immigration, and nuclear war. Those are kind of his three pet issues that he has a record of speaking out on and has been consistent on over 30 years. Whereas stuff like abortion, I don't think he cares about at all, which is why, you have a pretty big shift in the rhetoric going forward. And the second part is, I don't see it as brazen corruption. I see it ultimately as the product of an unprecedented lawfare campaign. And I guess we never got a chance to talk about that, but an unprecedented lawfare campaign against the guy where they indicted him 4 times in 4 jurisdictions in a little over 4 months, and with the intent of bankrupting him and ruining him and keeping him out of the election. I think that in fact makes him more and more politically pragmatic. And so he's like, look, I need to win because I need to stay out of jail. And I think that most Republicans looking at that are like, yeah, you need to stay out of jail and we need to win. So you got to take money from Jeff Yass and change your position on TikTok. So be it. Some things are more important.
That's an interesting defense of corruption. Okay, Will, I appreciate you. I had 1,000 things to say about what you just said, but we're out of time. So okay. We'll have to do it another time. Will Chamberlain, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, no problem. All right, guys, we're going to go to Jesse Merl of Jesse on Fire next while we get him on. Remember, 20% off of monthly membership at tyt.com/2024, or you could just hit the join button below. And Laura Elizabeth and Fox Spirit or Inari just did that. We appreciate you guys a lot. National Hollis says TYT debating multiple right-wing and moderate pundits like this should happen a lot more. Get Dave Rubin on too. Bounds of reason, brother. Bounds of reason. We're trying to bring on honest people, and whether we agree or disagree, have honest conversations, not grifters. Okay, so Crystal says, no instability with Trump, reversing Roe versus Wade and messy state laws now, removing power from regulatory agencies. That's why we have so many recalls on food, etc. Title IX, that's just the basic stuff. So that's a great point, because it depends on, when you say stable or unstable, who do you mean, right? So the deregulation has massive price on us. We just pay that price a little bit later. That's the thing with Donald Trump. When he put a lot of pressure on the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low, what that created was a situation where inflation could rise up. And it did. It just did when he was out of office. So he's like, what? And the same thing with all the deregulation. But all right, anyway, great points. Keep them coming, guys. I'll read your super chats and, of course, member comments as well. But now, joining us is Jesse Merl. He's the host of the popular YouTube channel, Jesse on Fire. He covers politics, culture issues, and UFC, so that's fun. Jesse, welcome.
How are you, sir?
Good, brother, good. All right, Jesse.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Jesse, let me ask you the same question I'm asking everybody. Why are you supporting Donald Trump?
Well, because I cover UFC. You can't cover UFC and vote for Kamala. It's a rule. Dana White said it. I can't have a career if I don't support Trump. So that's basically the direction I'm going. No, I'm just kidding. I wrote down a bunch of stuff that I could go to, but for me, I think the simplest place that we could go that I hadn't heard anyone else talk about is the pandemic. I mean, the fact that entire thing is such a distant memory in people's minds blows my mind personally. Now, it affected us a lot more than it did a lot of people, but I think when you put a country or a company or the world in general into a situation like that, people are going to show you exactly who they are. And for me, if I was going to itemize the things that are most important to me in terms of government, their role in my life, or in terms of my own fears or things that I want to feel secure about, it goes in this order. A, I don't want to die in a nuclear war. I know way too much about nuclear weapons for any healthy person to know. And then, B, I want the freedom to make decisions for myself and my family. And I feel as though if the government takes action that ends up hurting the citizens of the country, and they do it based on dishonest reasons or reasons they end up being absolutely dead wrong on, then people need to hold them accountable. And this is not just a Kamala issue, although she has a special position in this because when the vaccine first became available, she came out and said she doesn't recommend people take the vaccine because Donald Trump was involved in the development of the vaccine. And then as soon as Joe Biden took office, she's like, not only does everybody need to get it, but if you don't get it, we're going to fire you from your job. We're going to not allow you to go into restaurants. We're going to force you to wear masks inside of buildings where anybody who's vaccinated doesn't have to. I mean, they literally turned our society upside down. Now, I would imagine that a lot of your viewers, probably most of your viewers, were on the side that took the shot. And so to you guys, you didn't see what it was like on the other side or how it made people that didn't take the shot feel. And if anybody still thinks at this point that it was unreasonable to not want to take the shot after they had already had the virus and there were no long-term tests on the thing, whenever I get into this conversation, people always try to drill me on the science. They're like, oh, so, hey, I'm still waiting for everybody to drop dead of heart attacks. I'm like, who's talking about heart attacks? I'm talking about they tried to mandate, they did mandate that I take a thing that has no long-term testing. I know a lot about the process for getting these things approved. And if you're going to put something on warp speed, there better be a really good reason that I need to take it. And if you're going to take my job away, which they did, by the way, if I don't take it, then, someone needs to answer for that. And bottom line is, there's no question which side was doing what. And whatever side was telling people they had to shut down their restaurant, shut down their business, fire the people who haven't taken it, put masks on their kids, not allow kids to go to school. At our jiu-jitsu school, you have to put like cardboard over the windows if people want to train. It's nuts, man. And so it's like, okay, well, who was behind that? It's like, those guys, cool. I'm on the other side of that forever, 100% forever. Okay. No matter what they're doing, I disagree. I don't believe anything they say. They have killed all of their credibility as far as I'm concerned. They could literally tell me that the sky is blue. I'd be like, okay, where's the part that you tell me that because the sky is blue, I need to like inject some new thing into my eyeball? I don't trust them. I'll never trust them ever again. And that is why I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Okay, so there's a lot there. Let me break it down. So first of all, you complain about warp speed. I hear you, brother, but that was Donald Trump. He launched Operation.
Yeah, but he never mandated that I take it.
Okay, all right, but I'm just saying on warp speed, that was him. Secondly, Kamala Harris didn't say don't take a vaccine. They said, would you trust something that Donald Trump had a part to do with? And she said, well, given his corruption, his incompetence, I don't know about that. But she didn't come out against vaccines under Trump. And so now, but let's go to the main point, which is mandate or not mandate. So George Washington mandated that his troops take a vaccine for smallpox. And back at a time when vaccines were really underdeveloped, I mean, it was obviously hundreds of years ago, and it killed a third of his army. But it saved the rest. They would have all died and we would have lost the war. And that is usually credited for an incredibly brave decision of George Washington, even though he knew that a lot of his soldiers were gonna die, and we won the war. So now, and that's one example, but I can give you dozens of examples of mandating you take a polio vaccine, mandating you take X vaccine, especially if it's contagious. Because the whole point is, if it's just you on the planet, Jesse, of course you do whatever you like. I mean, you live, you die, that's your choice, right? But if you can spread it to others, then Washington is right. Then the people who say, yeah, but if you don't take the vaccine, that endangers me. Can you not see why they would be concerned about that?
Of course, but did the vaccine stop the spread?
Yeah, so it did.
It did?
Yeah, so
the vaccine stopped people from getting
no,
COVID?
no. See, that's the black and white world. So there's no magic vaccine that prevents all of the spread all at once. The question is, does it bring it down? And it did bring it down. And it doesn't mean that you can't get COVID again. What it meant is that you won't die from COVID. And the death rate went dramatically down after the vaccines.
Do you think that maybe the death rate went down because the people had all started having it? You know what? I don't even. It doesn't even matter. We're gonna go down a rabbit hole. That's pointless.
No, there is also natural immunity. I understand what you're saying. And if you already had it, you need the vaccine less. That's also true. Both of those things were factors, but not that many people. Like a ton of people, like 1 million people got it. That's a lot of people, right? But there's 330 million people in the country, so wouldn't have been enough for natural immunity. Vaccine did most of it, but that's my opinion. But
what about the governor of New York who fired the healthcare workers who all had COVID and they didn't want to take the shot? And then literally the first thing she did, they got rid of Cuomo. She came in, first thing she did, fired. I've seen there's an argument of what the numbers is. I heard 70,000. I've seen it as low as 35,000. Let's call it 35,000. She fired 35,000 healthcare workers in New York that did not want to take the shot, who had already had COVID. Is that a reasonable thing to do?
No, I don't think it is. I also don't think that Andrew Cuomo letting it spread like wildfire in nursing homes, because nursing homes were donors of his.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah, those are all terrible, but I hate corporate politicians. And so,
me too.
Yeah, and so, I'm not defending firing healthcare workers, especially if they already had it. And they would, so that's a slightly different situation. But in the general population, I agree with it. But overall, Jesse, it gets to the question that is at the core of not just Republicans or Democrats or Trump versus Kamala Harris. It gets to the core of, individual rights versus community, right? And ironically here, the right wing is arguing against community. The left wing is saying, no, we should look out for each other and we should be a community together. So I'm gonna take the vaccine so I don't get myself sick, but also because I don't wanna get you sick. And so there's a downside to individual, like I love individual rights. We need freedom of speech, we need all those things, right? But can you see how we gotta balance it between the individual rights and the community's interests?
100%. What happened in that case, in my opinion, is if you're gonna play the, if you're going to say that we all need to take the risk of taking this medication that they have no long-term studies of, it needs to be coming from a person or an entity that we trust. And they had murdered their faith, or our faith in them telling us the truth by the time that was happening. I think that had to do with the fact that the machine hates Trump. There's no possible rational person who would disagree with the fact that the mainstream media and the large scale machine, they hate him. They will do anything to make sure that he's not the president. And throughout his presidency, they played every single card that they had. I didn't start off a Trump supporter. When he got elected, I was not a Trump supporter. I ended up a Trump supporter because I paid such close attention to it and I caught them lying about him so many times. I'm like, Jesus, man, they're just making this stuff up. And then so I started watching the clips that they had pretended that he had said, oh, he's like, oh yeah, you got good guys on both sides. And you watch the full clip, you're like, wow, they just completely lied about that. That's an outright lie. There's no other way that you can interpret that. They intentionally misrepresented what he said in order to call him a supporter of white supremacy. He's the president of the United States. That's insane. You guys care about the country and you're gonna pretend the guy's a white supremacist. Ironic, the day after Kamala marches out on stage and she's like, yeah, he definitely wants Adolf Hitler type generals. And everyone's all, yeah, fucking right. No one believes her. We don't believe you, dude. I don't believe for 1 second he said that. I don't believe he said that. I don't believe this girl who said that, oh yeah, Trump and Jeffrey Epstein molested me in 1992. Yeah, fucking right, dude. No one buys it anymore. And so that's the group that's going, all right, look, man, you guys have to take this shot. And I'm like, says who? They're all Bill Gates. I'm like, that's a really credible person that I definitely trust. Go ahead, fire it up, dude. Give me a break.
Yeah, Elon Musk, on the other hand, says, oh yeah, they're gonna, you should be worried about that. But he's building something that is a chip that goes into your brain. He doesn't get any more tracking than that. But anyways, I want to focus on Trump. So you mentioned Trump versus the machine. So the machine does hate him, that's true. And I know that that's why a lot of people support him, because they hate the machine. I get it, and I hate the machine. And sometimes I do catch them in lies. So for example, when they were obsessing about the bloodbath, right? I was like, no,
oh my God,
no.
That was egregious.
Yeah, that was egregious because I watched that speech and he was talking about the economy, he was talking about cars, he was not talking about violence, okay? So the Young Turks are always honest about stuff like that. Look, when you get to the both sides one, I know that he did the plausible deniability by saying, oh, I'm against white supremacists. But the only people that were there were the neo-Nazis and the guys who support the Confederate generals. And I don't know anybody that, look, in my opinion, I'm a progressive. I don't think there's anybody good on that side. I wouldn't defend, and they killed somebody in that speech and then they did the Jews will not replace us. Why would you bother saying there's good people on that atrocious side, especially when
anyone who was saying that there are good guys in that group is a stupid fuck. There's not one good person walking around with a tiki torch talking about Jews won't replace us and then running people over. Like, obviously, those are not good guys. There's not a single good guy in that group, not one. What he was referencing were people who were like, guys, these are historical figures. Don't tear down the statue. I'm assuming. I was not there. I don't know all of the people. I'm making assumptions that, I know that's what he thinks he was talking about. It's just a single example of many times where they take him out of context and just butcher what he was saying. And the bloodbath thing, that's a perfect example. Like, I'm listening to him. I was watching all the people who were going, before me, and I'm going, okay, I'm good. I'm glad these guys are getting all of the, like, let's get into the weeds on this. That's not the stuff that I pay attention to. The ins and outs of Palestine and Israel or any of that stuff. I don't pay attention to that stuff because I'm not smart enough to pretend like I understand foreign policy. Even if I had all the facts that are delivered to us, I know there's a bunch of other stuff going on that I'm not privy to. So that's not where I focus. But on that particular issue, when he's talking about China is building these massive car manufacturing plants in Mexico, and he's like, I'm not going to let American companies bring all of the American manufacturing jobs down to Mexico and just go, all right, cool. Yeah, I guess all these guys are out of work. I'll throw 100% tariff on any imports from Mexico on cars. and I'm going to make it more expensive for them to manufacture cars in Mexico to save American manufacturing jobs. I'm like, that is a policy that makes perfect sense to me, at least if it ends up working. And I understand his motivation. Like when they ask Kamala, like, so what's your plan for fill in the blank? And she goes, blah, 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 blah. Like the only plan that I've heard her give any kind of coherent explanation of what she's going to do on is she's like, I'm going to tax unrealized gains 25%. I'm like, there is a 0% chance you're going to do that. Whether or not you realize that would collapse the economy is irrelevant, because I know you're not going to do that. There's not one corporate donor on earth who would ever allow you to do that. So I just want to understand your argument, because that's one of those things that you just fabricate because they assume stupid people who are poor will not understand that what they're saying is absolutely non-plausible, would never happen in a million years. So I buy a stock for $100 a share. Now it's worth 150. And now you're going to tax me. Say I put $1 million in. So now I've got 1.5 million. You're going to tax me on the 500K, and then it drops down to 80. And are you going to pay me that money back? It's idiotic. Of course they're not going to do it. It's a fucking lie.
Okay, so you mentioned a lot of things there. Let me take it one by one as quickly as I can.
Go for it.
So number one on unrealized capital gains. Okay, I agree with you. She's not going to do that. There's no way her donors would allow her to do that. But if you say she hasn't proposed specific policies, that's not true. She's proposed tons of specific policies on housing, on price gouging, on drug prices, et cetera. I don't think that it's enough, but she's proposed way more specific policies than Donald Trump has. In the case of China and Mexico, that particular one is a specific policy of Trump, so I'll give him that. So we try to be as fair as possible here. Getting back to what we were discussing with bloodbath and both sides, et cetera. But Jesse, you're then saying, I just don't believe anything about that is said about Trump, but there's so many things he says himself. So, he said he wanted to terminate the Constitution after he lost. So to me, that's a deal breaker. I know you're saying you don't believe a bunch of the things that his staffers said. I do, it depends, right? And so the effing Mexican line, I don't believe, it's not sourced well enough, et cetera. But John Kelly is on the record, and you can say he's a liar. I don't think he's a liar. And he's a right winger. I'm not in favor of John Kelly. He's part of the establishment. I'm not in favor of John Kelly. But a guy is unlikely to make up a lie like that. We can disagree on that. But you don't even have to go there, because Trump said terminate the Constitution. I'm done. I'm not going to vote for anyone who says, oh, well, if it doesn't suit my purposes, we should get rid of the Constitution.
I am aligned with you there. Anybody who actually supported terminating the Constitution, I would need to see exactly what was said, what the context was, and whether he meant it. I mean, anybody who's trying to go mess around with the Constitution, I'm completely aligned with you, except from my point of view, all I see is articles being written on the left about how they need to readdress the Constitution. I'm getting one of these, and I actually have a hard stop anyway. So
So
I appreciate you, Cenk. By the way,
Jesse, let me just show you the quote, just so you see it. And everybody can look it up for themselves. And he put it on True Social. Let's put that up if we can. This was after the election, and he said, a massive fraud of this type of magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. No, just because you think you lost, you can't terminate the Constitution and all the rules, regulations, and articles in it. So
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
The last thing I'm going to say, because I couldn't help myself, or I wouldn't be able to live with myself. You can't beat Rogan in a fight under any circumstances, no matter what. No rule set. It can't happen. It would never happen.
All right, that is also a fair point, Jesse. I appreciate you. Everybody check it out. Jesse on Fire. Thank you, brother.
All right, later.
Okay. All right, guys, we're going to go to JP Villasmil next. He's at the Spectator. That's a conservative outlet. And while we get him on the phone, let me do the usual here. I'll go to your comments. Falcon Acer said, they'll say they're against the vaccine because bodily autonomy, and then vote for the guy that takes away a woman's right to choose. That's an excellent point. Look, Falconer or Falcon Acer, I saw your point there. I didn't make it because I didn't want to steal from you. I wanted to let you have the point there, but terrific point. Look, one of my issues with all these conversations you're seeing here is that they think establishment bad, so Trump must be good. Or establishment lies, so everything they say about Trump must be a lie. No, establishment bad and often lies, but Trump did do a lot of those things, and he is dangerous. And that's why I get so frustrated with the establishment, because they're the boy who cried wolf. If you make up some stuff, then people won't believe you when the wolf actually comes. And the wolf did say to terminate the Constitution, and he has done all these dangerous, radical things that I'm worried without a check on him at all, it's going to be a nightmare for the next 4 years. That's why we can beat the establishment. We can do a populist revolt against the establishment. That is a machine that can be beat. But when you have someone who is a wannabe dictator and gets out of control power, that is much more difficult to deal with. All right, everybody, tyt.com/2024. If you were trying to raise money there, that would be amazing. And you get 20% off if you want to become a member today. We appreciate all you guys. So now let's go to our next guest here. JP Villasmil is a reporter at The Spectator, and he's a constitutional studies fellow at the American Conservative. Fun. Okay, JP, thanks for coming on. Tell me why you want to vote for Donald Trump.
Mr. Yoger, thank you for having me.
No problem.
I'm going to be honest. I enjoy seeing all the other debates, but I think we're missing some aura here, and we need to push back a little more. You keep referencing that Trump's a wannabe dictator. He wants to terminate the Constitution. You even referenced the fact that Trump said there's good people on both sides, and even Anna Kasparian agrees with me here. If you're going to attack Trump, you got to attack him with real facts. And the real facts, in my opinion, is that if you're a working class American, you should favor Trump. Reality is that most billionaires that you consistently trash support Kamala Harris. Reality is that if you're a billionaire and you're not America first, tariffs hurt you much more than domestic deregulation. Reality is that most working class Americans remember the Trump years. Reality is that when you look at poll after poll, Trump is winning with Hispanic Americans. There's a plus 21% increase from 2016 to 2024. Actually, he's leading with Arab Americans. He's leading with Teamsters. 65% of Teamsters members support Trump. So the Young Turks, all of you guys love the working class, and I do too. So what's going on? Like, the working class is not catching up with the Young Turks. They're catching up with Trump.
Okay, so a bunch of things there. First of all, Anna does not agree with anything you just said there, other than she says on the both sides comment, he did later say that he's against white supremacists. So I say that's plausible deniability. I don't think there was any good people on that pro-Nazi, pro-Confederate side, but we can agree to disagree on that. Okay, now in terms of supporting billionaires, Donald Trump is pretty famously supporting Elon Musk, richest man in the world, also very much supporting, and he says it in all these cases, Sheldon and Miriam Adelson. They gave him a combined about $300 million in the 3 races that he did. He says, well, I like their money, so I'm gonna do whatever they want. So he moved our embassy in Israel because Sheldon Adelson asked him to. He made corruption charges against him go away with a minimal fine when he had apparently bribed people in China. And the list goes on and on of all the corrupt things that he wants to do in favor of billionaires. So yeah, I don't see how he's any better there. Yeah, the Teamsters members, hold on. And the last thing on that, just out of the things that you mentioned, the Teamster members are slightly on Trump's side. I see that. I love the Teamsters, and I praise Sean O'Brien's speech a lot at the RNC. I thought it was the best speech out of both conventions. But on the other hand, if you're gonna say that, all the rest of the unions support Kamala Harris. So by your logic, if we're going for unions and the common guy, then you should vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, but the interesting thing here is the momentum. We see a shift. We see Kamala Harris going out with Liz Cheney. We see Kamala Harris trying to appeal to the Bush Republican. And we see Trump picking J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, if you guys remember, he was hated by the elites. J.D. Vance talked about family policy, about tariffs. He actually sometimes argued against tax cuts. J.D. Vance is the most populist figure that we've had in a presidential ticket in a while, with Donald Trump included. The momentum is there. The working class is moving in that direction. And actually, I believe that if you want to influence our politics into a working class direction, the Republican Party is the vehicle. My argument here, and I understand, I think you have a point. When you look at different elites within the country, of course, there's 2 major parties. Some elites are going to side with one party, some with another. But have you ever noticed that the elites that rely on domestic labor are the ones that support the Republican Party? It's people that make a lot of money with oil. It's, folks that want to expand in the United States of America. folks that don't mind the tariffs that much. The people that are arguing against Donald Trump, the people that are throwing billions against Donald Trump, are the people that are concerned with the tariffs because they're not concerned about the American people. They're not concerned about industrial policy. They don't want meaningful jobs. They don't care about people committing suicide more than ever before in our entire history, more than the Great Depression, where we were 3 times poorer back then. Why are people killing themselves so much now? Reality is that America is destroying itself, and these elites backing Democrats are the ones that are yielding this self-destruction, this self-immolation, I must say.
So JP, look, if I thought JD Vance and Trump were actual populists, I'd back them. You know, Bernie Sanders was an actual populist. I loved it, backed him. I don't want the establishment of either party. But what kind of a populist says, let's give a $2 trillion tax cut to the corporations? What kind of populist says, you know, hey, oil companies, give me $1 billion in campaign finance and I'll deregulate you, I'll give you more tax cuts. I mean, this is out and out corruption, and it has nothing to do with, it's the exact opposite of populism to give giant corporate tax cuts. How can you not see that?
You're fixating on that individual policy. And again,
yeah, it's a $2 trillion policy.
Within the Republican Party that agree with you here. But what I want to focus on here, which is important, is the reality is that you cannot just focus on that. You got to focus on the entire economy. If there's domestic deregulation and you incentivize domestic production, you increase the supply, therefore lowering inflation, while you focus on battling the externalization of markets in an increasingly globalized world where the world is increasingly transactional and the US is not. Every country applies tariffs, and we're one of the only countries in the world that goes, you know what? Actually, no tariffs is better. Free markets, free markets, free markets. My question is, if it's that easy, if free markets are the best, why aren't all the countries in the world doing it? Why is the US the only one that's like free markets, free markets, free markets? And reality is because the mega billionaires, actually like the Koch brothers, Bernie Sanders used to agree with me here, and I'm sure you did too. They like not having tariffs. They don't care that much about some corporate tax rates. They don't care that much about paying a little more in taxes. They make billions from externalizing labor, from making the Chinese build cheap goods. And meanwhile, Americans are jobless, they're suffering, and again, they're committing suicide in massive rates. And the people that are talking about this, the people that are actually innovating, when you read the American Conservative, the American Mind, and these publications, when you read what JD Vance once used to write and now talks about, they actually have a policy, they actually have a vision that looks at the complete picture. And to look at the complete picture, you must deal with the world first, not just, tax cuts. Tax cuts are not increasing tax is not the most populist policy. I would agree. I would actually argue tariffs are very populist.
Yeah, 76% of Americans believe that corporations have too much monopoly power and are using it to abuse the average American. They're 100% right. And Donald Trump says, yeah, let's deregulate them and give them more tax cuts to empower them to continue corporate rule and abuse us. We're in a fascinating, bizarre world where now the right wing is against free markets. So that's fascinating and interesting.
Supporting Trump, then most billionaires support Kamala Harris. You talk about Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the exception.
Okay, so JP, so as I explained earlier, we're number 1 in energy production. So the idea that Biden and Obama and Harris didn't drill enough is absurd. You've got to admit that that's absurd. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's absurd. Second of all, that goes into a giant global market. So let me ask you guys specific questions about that. So we give about $30 billion in subsidies every year to the oil companies. What the hell are we doing that for? They're the most profitable companies in the world. Why does ExxonMobil need my money? And Donald Trump says, no, give it to them. Well, what kind of populist is this? And why? He says, because they give me a lot of money. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's open corruption. He's just putting a for sale sign up. That's not a populist, that's a fake populist. And look, I don't understand why you guys can't see the con, right? So the guy, he runs a fake university, he runs a fake charity, has to pay $25 million fine for his fake university and $2 million fine for his fake charity. He uses the money to buy a 6-foot portrait of himself and pay his legal bills. And you don't think that maybe he's conning you and that he's not actually a populist and he's just looking out for Elon Musk and Jeff Yaz and the Adelsons and the oil companies that are giving him money? I mean, how could you not see it? He even says it.
Cenk, you're a really smart guy. You went to UPenn like the former president. And I think you understand that reality is that you can talk about subsidies and you know, I see people on the left do this all the time. They go like, they're subsidizing Tesla, they're subsidizing the oil companies.
Yeah.
And again, when you look at the global picture, reality is that our biggest geopolitical competitor has tremendous amounts of an ability to afford concessionary spending. They have a huge centralized government and they subsidize their companies like crazy. And they don't only do this within their own markets, but they do this externally. They do this in Mexico, they do this in Latin America, they do this everywhere else. So if the US government is not subsidizing our own companies, if the US government is not using import substitution in its industrialization to some degree, then that's not beneficial for our national security. There's indeed some areas of our economy that the United States government should incentivize. And I think the oil sector is one of those. R&D, technology, innovation, more broadly speaking, the US government has a role. So I always think it's funny because it's like, oh my God, the US government is giving so much money to Tesla. If we don't give that much money to Tesla, if we don't incentivize our company, do you think we're going to win against China? And
so
then what does
JP,
what
let's
does
break
that
that
mean for
down.
the US?
Let's break that down. So now you're saying we should subsidize our companies just like communist China does.
Yeah,
interesting.
That's exactly what I'm saying. To some degree,
Okay.
Again,
All right,
we're
we're just in amazing times. I'm just noting it for the record. Okay, but when you go to subsidize things, subsidizing some nascent industries makes sense. So for example, the CHIPS Act, I don't love it. It was a $50, $60 billion giveaway to semiconductor business, but I get it. I get that they needed to be protected for national security reasons. With electric vehicles and Tesla, you could actually make a decent case. It's still nascent enough to do that, although he's the richest man in the world, so he should subsidize his own businesses. But with oil companies that are ancient and super profitable, there's no reason other than a robbery. Let's go to the drug companies. We subsidize their research, and then normally if you're doing an investment in capitalism, if you subsidize something, well, you get an equity in it and you get money back from it. Except we subsidize the drug companies and then they rob us blind. And then they use their power with politicians to make sure we can't negotiate any drug prices. So, okay, I criticize Biden and Harris for not negotiating drug prices on the tens of thousands of drugs, but at least they did do 10 drugs, including some super important drugs like insulin. So when I turn to the Republicans, they go, no, I don't. We shouldn't negotiate any drug prices. We should just have the drug companies set the prices, no matter how high they are, and then we should pay them. I mean, if we did a story recently, dozens of Republican senators fighting like hell to make sure we can't negotiate drug prices. So what the hell kind of populace is that? Total nonsense. I mean, I can't believe that you can't see that they're tricking you and they're just walking you right over to corporate power. And Trump had 4 years. Why didn't he negotiate drug prices at all, Mr. Great Negotiator?
I mean, yeah, he's a fantastic negotiator, and I think he did a lot. But again,
on drug prices, he did nothing. By the way, he said he was going to, just like Obama. Obama said, "Oh my God, I'm going to negotiate drug prices." Trump said the same thing. Then Trump comes in. I mean, nothing. He never meant it.
He at least pushed the conversation in the right direction with some price transparency, allowing for increased competition in a sector where there wasn't enough competition. And that's a start. But again, when you trash those Republicans, I actually agree with you in a lot of ways. I don't like the establishment Republicans, and I see a change. I see young Republicans like myself pushing the conversation in that direction. I see JD Vance. JD Vance is a true believer. If you are a populist, if you care about the working class, look at JD Vance. Look at him, he's the real deal. But before we move on, I wanted to talk about immigration. What's going on? Immigration is the biggest issue, and we cannot talk about Trump without immigration. And reality is that if you care about the working class, you should care about immigration.
Yeah.
Right?
So one thing at a time. Real quick on JD Vance, you're right, we're running out of time, so I'll just say this and then we'll move to immigration. He was good on Lena Khan. He's been terrible on everything else. Loves corporate power, loves corporate giveaways, loves corporate tax cuts, loves corporate deregulation. Financed entirely by Peter Thiel, who's a massive pro-corporate power guy. So it's all fake. Again, I'm so frustrated you guys can't see it. Now, in terms of immigration, it did spike in the Biden years, that's definitely true. And it was both because of two different factors. One is some lax enforcement, so I don't fight that. I think that was an issue. But also because of massive issues in Venezuela, Peru, and other countries that did not send a lot of immigrants before, but sent millions because of the turmoil in those countries. And so that's also true. Can you acknowledge that?
No, I agree it's true. I don't agree with the particularities of some of the South American countries. Reality is that part of the reason why the flow of Venezuelan migrants has increased, and I know a lot about this topic. I have family in Venezuela, and I read extensively on the issue. It's not because the situation there got worse. The poverty rate has remained the same in the last 10 years. It's about supply. Reality is that there are incentives to come to America illegally. There are incentives to just cross the border, and those incentives weren't there. That infrastructure. I was talking to the former top Pentagon official for Trump in the Western Hemisphere. And he told me a phrase that I thought was really funny. He told me, he said it in Spanish. He said, the United States has become the coyotes of choice. And I think that's true. The US government is the most responsible for illegal immigrants coming here. We have all the incentives. We open our arms. Then they come here. Many of them commit crime. Many of them compete with our native population. Many of them drive wages down. Many of them make the housing, not very good. And then we turn around and we go like, actually, Democrats do this. Actually, we care about the border, secure the border. Come on now. Come on, Cenk. Like, you guys don't.
So JP, couple of things there. Number one, I hate the gangs that are coming over, and I think we should be tougher on the criminal gangs. At least we've started to get a little bit tougher now, and I like that. On the other hand, undocumented immigrants commit only half the crime on average of natural-born citizens. So under your logic, we should be kicking out the natural-born citizens because they're such rampant criminals.
I mean, there's something that you missed there. Maybe this is not a very sophisticated thought, but have you ever wondered that the fact that they're here illegally and we don't know who they are makes it a little hard to like document?
No, when they commit a crime, we document it perfectly well. I think
your viewers could be very intuitive here. What do you think?
No, JP, when they commit a crime, they get booked, so it's perfectly documented.
If they get catched.
And also I know, but they also don't catch natural-born citizens either when they commit crimes.
By definition, they all cross the border illegally. Like their first step into the United States literally was criminal because they're illegal immigrants.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and you can say, hey, I don't like that they came in undocumented. No problem, right? But if we're talking about crime that we're really worried about, again, this is the demagoguing that I think is not at all helpful. So when Donald Trump says, "Oh, they're eating cats and dogs," that's terrible because it's not true, and you're getting people to hate Haitians for no reason. We're talking about the poisoning the blood of our country. That's terrible. That's fascist talk. Don't do that. It's okay to say, "Hey, we should have boundaries. We should have certain rules to prevent undocumented immigrants from crossing." And we can have a debate about what those rules should be. But when you start spreading hatred about immigrants and then talking about how they're criminals, but wait a minute, like I said, the criminals that we catch are perfectly documented, and natural-born citizens commit twice as much crime on average as undocumented immigrants. So the idea of kicking the natural-born citizens out based on crime is of course absurd. So don't, like, using crime there is a false narrative, and you could tell because it's just not true that they commit more crime. And so when they cherry pick one or two crimes that are terrible, and then they go, "Oh my God, look at all these criminals." Can you not see how that's demagoguery? And we're not having a reasonable conversation on how much immigration we should have and what our rules should be. We're demonizing immigrants.
That's blatant reductionism. Like reality is Americans know this, and that's why the majority of Americans agree with me, and likely why Trump is going to win. Of course, illegal immigration causes a lot of crime. Of course, it brings a lot of drugs into this country. Of course, illegal immigration is a big problem. This like cherry picked fact from like probably a liberal think tank that like actually the illegal immigrants don't commit less crime than the native born population. Again,
yeah. JP.
We all know that's not. We all know that's not true. Maybe I'm an anti-intellectual here, but I listen to that fact and I'm like, yeah, I don't buy it, and also I don't care. Even if that were true, I wouldn't care because it's not just about crime; it's about everything else. And again, I'm counting some other things that maybe they're not counting as crimes, like crossing the border illegally into our country, and like all the drugs that come in, many of them of people that we never catch.
Yeah.
So
listen, JP,
I don't know who the criminal is. But it's true with violent crime. You're right. Like with violent crime, if you kill a person and we catch you, then we can do some econometrics and we can add the numbers. But
yeah,
it's hard to do numbers with illegal immigrants. That's why it's a problem.
Not really. I got to go to Mike Lindell next. But listen, brother, don't take the anti-intellectual stance. I got into a huge fight with leftists over criminal gangs from Venezuela. So I don't want any criminals in here. I want to kick them out. I don't like criminal gangs taking over apartment complexes or apartment units. I don't want it, right? And the American people don't want it. But we also want to treat immigrants with decency. That's what the overwhelming majority of Americans say. We have to have reasonable rules, but be decent. So you've got to acknowledge facts. They're not criminals and rapists more so than other people. They're not poisoning the blood of this country. Immigrants are what made this country. You just have to have reasonable rules around it.
You're doing it again with the rapist line. Like, he's not talking about like the average Mexican. Again, like,
okay, well,
my name is Juan Pablo. Like, my name is Juan Pablo. Like, if he was calling me a rapist, I'd be like, Donald Trump, I hate you.
Okay,
but like,
all right,
he wasn't. Not true.
Okay, well, he definitely said criminals and rapists. That's like one of those most famous lines of all time. But JP, I appreciate you. Thank you for joining us, reporter at The Spectator. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, Cenk.
All right, you too. All right, we're gonna have My Pillow on next. I'm playing around. Mike Lindell's been on a couple of times. He's gonna come back on here and defend Donald Trump. TYT.com/2024 to help out and to become a member. 20% off today if you become a member today. We appreciate you guys. By the way, Dan from earlier plugged his shirt. I liked it, and I'll plug shoptyt.com where you can get some ceasefire shirts. And if you're anti-war, you're gonna want to be ceasefire. It's a great shirt. Anyway, Balk says Cenk is being unfathomably based by hosting this. I didn't know I was gonna be unfathomably based. I guess I like that. And Terrace makes another great point. And by the way, guys, I will, after we're done with Mike, I'm gonna do a bonus episode for members, so great time to join, and I will read more of your super chats. If you're a conservative and you wanna challenge me or you wanna ask me a question or whatever it might be, do a super chat now, or if you're a member, great, we'll do that as well. So that to become a member, tyt.com/2024, or hit the join button below, and we'll do that segment for you guys. And Terrace wrote in, Trump called me enemy from within, he will attack, and I believe him. Sorry, but I can't vote for that. So the exact point that I'm making here, as much as I hate the establishment and we need to do a populist revolt against it, not with a guy who is totally unstable, keeps referring to American citizens as the enemy within, keeps talking about using the military against American citizens. Those are all disastrous ideas. I don't think the MAGA guys who hate the establishment, I don't think you understand who Donald Trump is. You're, in my opinion, being blinded by your bias. I don't like those guys, so the enemy of my enemy must be my friend. He ain't your friend. He's doing a long con on you guys. He always, con men pick their marks and then they go after them. And so you're ignoring all of the terrible things he said because you think it's convenient. I don't think that's a good idea. Let me do a shout out here to Alicia Lucero, who just became a member as we're waiting for Mike, who will be on in a second. And do a shout out for Matthew Glenn, Angel Fire 0505, and JJ the Cat. All the handles are always funny. They all donated or became members through tyt.com/2024. We appreciate all you guys, and I appreciate everybody who's watching, who's keeping an open mind. That's the most important thing of all. Mike Lindell, obviously CEO and founder of MyPillow and Trump advisor and friend, joins us now. Mike, how you doing, brother?
Good. Hey, Cenk, thanks for having me on again.
No problem. All right, so Mike, look, I know your concerns about voting. We talked about that last time. So tell me why you're supporting Trump over the others in this election.
Well, he has proof of concept. You go back to December of 2019, and so many decisions that he made or his administration made manifested to all our lives, no matter where they were. If you were with all the way from no forks to four forkers and everything in between, had improved someone. It was a high consumer confidence, one of the highest ever. Low unemployment. We had gas prices low, and these are things that. Businesses, my business, a lot of small businesses were thriving. So I just think he's a businessman and he makes good decisions that help all people, not just a party.
So Mike, you brought up low unemployment. So I'm going to reuse some unemployment stats throughout the years to give you a sense of what happened with it. So, and I know you got to follow along here and I don't have a graphic on it for you, but so you know how we had to crash in 2008? So unemployment spiked in 2009, right? So 9.9%. Obama's president, then he starts bringing it down. The next year it's 9.3. The year after that it's 8.5, then 7.9, then 6.7, then 5.6, then 5.0. So now we're in 2015 and he's brought it all the way down to about half of what it was. So great job by Obama in doing that, okay? Now I got other issues. I'm sure you have other issues with Obama, but he did bring down unemployment. He hands that off to Trump. Trump brings it down, 4.7. To be fair, no, 2016 is still Obama, 4.7 for Obama. Then Trump brings it down to 4.1, 3.9, 3.6. So pretty good. But you can see it's a trend that's coming down that was handed to him from Obama, okay? That doesn't mean that it's all Obama. It means let's be fair, right? And so then COVID hits, and I'm being fair back and say it goes up to 6.7, but COVID hit, right?
Right.
So then Biden comes in, brings it back down to 3.9. Okay, that's good.
But COVID got over. You got to be fair there too.
Yeah,
COVID got over.
So that's why I'm not doing. No, Mike, that's why I'm not doing the job numbers. I'm doing the percentages.
Yeah,
because Trump loses a lot of jobs, but it's not. It's because of COVID. Biden brings those jobs back. Okay, you could say that's a wash, right? But he brings the unemployment rate down to 3.9%. That's the first one that Trump did. So how did he do in 22 and 23? 3.5% and 3.7%, better than Trump. And in 2022 it was a record low.
I think you're taking it through an anomaly in history, not comparing apples to apples there, but that's fine. I think there's many other factors too. I just look at what had manifested to whether you give Obama part credit. When we got to late December of 2019 and late into 2019, it was the highest consumer confidence. I mean, gas was low. Gasoline controls so much of our product prices. It's not just what you pay at the gas pump, it's what you pay for everything from groceries to products, because the shipping costs that went through the roof. And another thing that I really like about Donald Trump is I'm a former crack cocaine addict, and my passion was to help addicts before I had never voted in my life. I never, until 2016, I didn't even know a Democrat from a Republican. I didn't care about politics. But one thing I did care about was addiction. And Donald Trump had done a lot in that space for addiction. The opiate bill, I was there. I know many things. He took regulations off where you didn't have to go to school to help an addict. You had your teen challenges, your Salvation Armies, where he did a lot of things for that industry. So I look at things like that, where it's a businessman. He takes things, silos them out, and say, how can I help this particular industry or this particular thing? And then you look at it as a whole. And he's been doing it all his life as a businessman. When I first met him, I didn't know him from Adam. I went in, it was a private meeting. He wanted to know how it was like to make, how I was doing making my pillows here in the US. Was it working out? He wanted my opinion. Some guy from Minnesota, an ex-crack addict. And that I respected that. But after talking to him for 45 minutes, I got to personally vet the guy. He didn't have an agenda. He didn't ask me for money. And I went and asked his employees. I said, "Is this for real?" He said, "Yeah, he's a good boss. He's a good boss, good person." And they had all had a personal story about him, how he had helped them. Some of these employees, it didn't matter who they were. I really respected that. I thought, you can tell a lot by people, the employees that work for them, and I went all in for him. I'd never met a president before. I'd never voted before, but if he said what he told me in that room, that he was going to do those things, I thought it made a lot of sense, and he did fulfill those promises, and it helped. It helped a lot of small businesses. I believe he brought many jobs back. I know it helped my personal business. It was consumer confidence. I mean, people were just very confident, and now I see he was smart when you say, okay, we're shutting down a border where fentanyl was pouring in and drugs, and that meant a lot to me too, as I was running my own Lindell recovery network, and so that's when I ended up going all in, because it just made sense. It was common sense solutions. I don't care what party. He had the solutions that were there, and I believe he fulfilled them.
Yeah, so I wish I could agree with you, Mike, but I don't. So I'm going to break this all down. But I'm curious what you said about drug addiction. I want to come back to that in a minute, because maybe he deserves credit on that, but I'm not sure. So first you said, look, he's a successful businessman. No, he's not. Mike, you're way more successful businessman than Donald Trump is. Donald Trump was handed $413 million from his dad. You didn't get $413 million from your dad, did you? No.
No, I got it.
No, and he blew that first $400 million. He had 6 massive bankruptcies, and he said, it's good business not to pay your debts. No, that's not good business. That's terrible business, and I'm worried that he's going to do that for the country. He drove up the deficit and the debt by $8.4 trillion. If he does it again, it's going to be totally out of control, mainly corporate tax cuts. And you said he was a good boss. He was, a brother. I know he was nice to you. But
no, I'm saying his employees. I personally vetted, asked his employees. You can't. That's coming out of their mouth. They had no reason to lie to me.
I hear you, but Mike, half his employees right now are going, don't. Oh my God, he's so dangerous. He's
no, those aren't employees. Those aren't employees. I'm talking employees in his private business. I'm talking. I've read those things, those hit jobs from the media, but I'm talking about his employees that have been with him at Trump Tower when I visited him the first time I ever met him. And these are the employees I'm talking about, the ones that the maids, the ones that work in the hotels that I stayed in of his. And you never had anybody come out in 2016 and badmouth him of employees. And that's got to say
Mike,
something.
You're seeing a different view. You're seeing a different view. And then look, I'm respecting and I believe you totally that you say, hey, you talk to some employees of Trump, and then they like
a lot of employees,
right?
A lot of employees.
But I'm telling you that there's tons of employees that have come out from the Trump organization too. So I remember this story of one of the executives. He's building Trump Tower. They said we got to put Braille on the elevators. It's law in New York. He says, don't do it. They're like, what do you mean? We have to do it. It's the law. He's like, I don't care, don't. And she said he would always put us in positions so that he could blame us when something went wrong. So if we put the Braille in because we have to, he blames us. And if we don't put it in and it's illegal, then he's going to blame us, and then we're going to be charged.
All I know is that I know him personally. I think he's a great friend. He's a good man. I met him in 2016. I have vetted many people. If you read my book, I've been in the streets. I read people. He has his agenda. He loves the country. He loves people, and he has no other agenda. He doesn't have to do this. He has no other agenda,
Mike. You don't think he's making a tremendous amount of money from this? I mean, he's selling gold shoes. He's selling $60 Bibles. He's getting money from the Saudis. His son-in-law's getting money from the Saudis.
He doesn't need that money, and he's lost hundreds of millions. Here's what I want to say. There is. I just look at, for me, if there was a better candidate in this race, if you're talking this race, well, show them to me. But all I know is that she was a part of an administration that I'm telling you right now I go all over this country and I talk to Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter, of the people and their lives, their physical lives here it's way worse than it was. There's so many nonsensical things being done that I don't understand. There's no sense to letting that border open. There was no sense to shutting down our pipeline on your first day in office. And I know Waltz very well. I could sit and talk the whole show about him, but I'm not. If you're talking about Donald Trump, I'm saying he has proof of concept to me and to many others in this country where he got us to in that highest consumer confidence and where it was. You can say Obama took part of credit for that. That's the way the country is going. But all I know is the last 3.5 years is going to a pretty bad place in a lot of ways. And I blame that on an administration, on decisions made in government.
Yeah.
And you got Kamala Harris. We ask her, well, what are you going to do? Well, why aren't you doing it now the last 3.5 years to solve these problems, these things we have? We have illegals taking. I sat, when we met last time at the Democrat convention, I sat there and we filmed many Democrats, about 100 Democrats that voted for Biden and now are voting for Trump. And I asked them, why are you switching? And what a lot of what came out of there was illegals have taken their resources and jobs. And it doesn't make sense that they're letting them come in and that they can vote, they can drive cars, my home state of Minnesota, what Waltz has done there with them, it's just not fair to people that came here legally, and that there's two different standards. And they were very upset about it.
So Mike, first of all, Donald Trump throughout his career has hired thousands of undocumented immigrants on almost all.
I don't know that.
Yeah, well,
I don't know that. I'm gonna have to have Alan Duke fact check you. Come on.
I would love it. Definitely fact check that. Okay, in the towers that he built, in the golf courses that he had. In fact, they found undocumented immigrants in his golf courses while he was president. So he's an enormous hypocrite on that. But
Jake, you're going in the past. People. I was an ex-crack addict. You could say all the things you want about my past. Donald Trump's past is not. But no. When he's president, he wasn't running those golf courses and stuff. He had nothing to do with it. He was running the United States of America, and he was making the good decisions.
So people can look that up, no problem, and you'll see he's hired undocumented immigrants throughout his career. But okay, so let's talk about substance and the country and how it's going. So look, I hear this a lot from conservatives saying, "Oh, the country was doing great under Trump, and now it's bad under Biden." And then you talk about jobs, but wait a minute, we have record low unemployment. You talk about undocumented immigrants taking people's jobs. If they're taking people's jobs, why do we have record low unemployment?
I don't know. Have they been unemployed for so long they're not reported? I don't know that, Cenk. I don't know. My point being is that you're saying this is why people, if they ask themselves, they ask Kamala right in the debate, do you think people are better off now than they were 3.5 years ago? And I can't find anyone that says, no, I'm much better off now. You can't. When you go to a grocery store and it's outrageous and all these prices, and to be able to live a joyful life and happy while we're here. And Donald Trump does have proof of concept. What was so bad? I'm going to ask you, under Donald Trump yourself, what didn't you like that he did while he was in office, other than had to fight attacks by everyone under the sun? And he's like a one-man executive there trying to get stuff done that would help people. And he was, even with all the pushback and the attacks, he still got a lot of great things done. That's what I ask people, what did he do that you didn't like while he was in office? You can say, well, look what he did in his personal life back here, or look what he said on Twitter or whatever. But what did he do that actually hurt your life or bettered your life? That's what you got to ask yourself. I think that's what everybody should ask themselves about candidates that they're going for.
Yeah, I think people have rose-colored glasses on what they thought happened in the Trump years. So there was only a couple of major bills that he passed. So he did criminal justice reform a little bit, and I gave him credit for that. So okay,
And the opiate bill, he helped addiction. And let me tell you, there weren't any wars. There wasn't any wars.
On,
so
Mike,
let's not
I'm
forget.
answering your question.
And he got rid of ISIS.
Hold on, no. So, but then under that logic, Obama got rid of Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. So we should always vote Democrat. So that's the military doing their job under both presidents. So, what was the major thing that he passed? You know what the major thing was? His corporate tax cuts. He gave $2 trillion tax cut to corporations. Look, even on his own agenda, the wall, he forgot about it. And then 6 months before the election, he's like, oh yeah, the wall. Because he doesn't really care, Mike. He doesn't care. The main thing that he did was giant giveaways to the richest people in the country, and it was constant one crazy idea after another, and putting it like, so people are worried about a hurricane that's coming. I mean, I'll give you there's 1,000 examples. Go to tyt.com/library and you'll see all the crazy things that he's done that our audience has facts on, has links on, etc. But just one of so many different examples is hurricanes come, people are worried about where it's gonna hit, but he said it wrong. So then he takes a Sharpie and redraws the path of the hurricane that makes people panic about that they're gonna get hit with a hurricane when they're not. And the people who are gonna get hit might not know it. I mean, he does these crazy things, Mike.
Well, what's crazier that you see that, or you live like where I live in Minnesota, and I got a crazy guy named Tim Walsh. During the virus, he limited us to 8 people in our houses for Thanksgiving, gave us 2 more for Christmas, and your neighbor could turn you in and you would do 90 days in jail. And want to shut down our lakes. Let Minneapolis burn to the ground. These are things I'm going, who are you to decide this for the people? And
Mike,
those are things that affect us. This is what
Mike,
I'm saying. I'm saying
you're worried about the riots in Minnesota. You're worried about the riots in Minnesota. I hear you. But we had a riot on January 6th that Donald Trump encouraged and then didn't stop.
No, he didn't encourage. He said go there peacefully and whatever.
Mike, see, that's the thing though. But this is how folks on the right lose credibility.
The riots in Minnesota
do you think January 6th was because of Bernie Sanders? Do you think it was because of Mother Teresa? Come on, you know it was because of Donald Trump.
No, it was not because of Donald Trump.
Who did they riot on behalf of?
Well, let me tell you, there was people there. I went to many rallies. I stood out in front of the Supreme Court on December 14th with six little police officers, 200,000 people, and I was the host out there talking. There was no problems. Whatever, on January 6th, by the time I know people that were there at the rally and then went up there, by the time they went up there, I know very close people that went up there. And they got up there and go, who are these people already here? There were many people already there. I could sit and tell you, and you'd call me a conspiracy theorist and all this. There's a lot of things that were not explained there. Why wasn't it protected when Pelosi was told to do that? There was many things that happened that we can't explain, and you sit there and you say, well, this was because of Donald Trump. I was there in that rally on the front row, and he said, go there peacefully. That's our right to protest, right? People can protest, go there peacefully. He didn't say go there and do something dangerous. In Minneapolis, I had my own friends that got out of crack addiction, had built businesses along Lake Street in Minneapolis, and they were burned to the ground while Walsh waited over a day and a half to even do anything about it and let our precinct get burned to the ground. I know, that what he's done, these are things that were nonsensical. When I know Walsh, I've done many things where he's stopped me just because it's Mike Lindell and I stand for Donald Trump. And I just, for me, you got these two running. You ask, like with Kamala and him running, what are they going to do? Kamala, they haven't done anything that we wouldn't do. What's the sense? The sense of having illegals come in here, come into Minnesota, come into other states, and you give them driver's license and they're getting the money, where people, I've talked to people, and they're Democrats too, by the way, that are in the inner city. That's where I came from. And they're going, hey, and they're changing because they're tired of, what one Democrat said in Chicago when we were there at the DNC, he says, it's like a relationship, a volatile relationship where, an abusive relationship where you get promises and promises, and then all of a sudden they get in office and then you get abused again, and it's a cycle. And they're never-ending cycle. And you're talking about someone, like I say, I never voted. I've been in both places, and I'm just looking and saying, this makes more sense because I really believe he makes decisions that help people, all people. When politicians
not all
make
people,
decisions,
not Mike Pence. So, Mike, listen, we're out of time.
No, I just want to say one thing. I want to say one last thing.
Okay.
When decisions is made in government that don't help the people, not either party, they don't help us as a people. There's another agenda, and it's a hidden agenda, and I believe it's very evil. I don't understand why politicians. I just did a speech in Hawaii 2 nights ago, and guess what? It was a Republican blocking. I've dealt more with Republican blockers in my efforts to try and get to paper ballots and counted, and I told you this last time, and it doesn't make sense to me that one party, a Democrat party, wanted these machines gone. They wanted to go to paper ballots and count. Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, my senator, and then you got over here some Republicans stopping it. So, I mean, this thing, I think, you know, for me, you know, but go ahead. I'm just,
I don't think the agenda.
It's just been very frustrating. It's been one thing we did agree on last time I was on, is we should have secure elections. And there's, you know, if paper ballots hand counted are the most secure, I think everybody would agree on that.
Yeah. So look, their agenda is not that secret. Republicans and Democrats serve their donors. There, I solved it.
Right. I agree.
Okay. And so, but the last thing I want to ask you, see, Mike, you guys have this rose-colored view of Trump, in my opinion, and I'm super worried that he's a dangerous guy. So you say he didn't cause January 6th. Okay, fine. We had that debate, right? But after the riots began, for 3 hours, everyone's begging him. They're calling from inside the Senate. There are Republicans calling him, his family members calling him, please send out a message to stop them. Then Mark Meadows comes in, according to testimony, a sworn testimony, says they're trying to kill your vice president. They're chanting, hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence. And he tells his chief of staff he deserves it. Mike, we can't do that. We can't have a president who's okay with having his vice president being murdered.
Right. I mean that's subjective there. And let me tell you, here's what I have to say, Cenk. I know Donald Trump personally. If I didn't, and I'm looking at the outside in, I know he's a good man. I had my opinion of you, which was a very bad opinion until I went on his show and I met you personally. It totally changed. I really view you as a good person now. And we just have different viewpoints. I have personally vetted and know Donald Trump personally. So I can sit there, you can sit and tell me all day long, is this whatever was said on it, is that the context? I mean, he didn't mean to hang Mike Pence. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. I know the guy. He's, does he say stuff that can be bombastic? He uses his truth in Twitter? Yes. But all I know is that as a president, he makes decisions that you silo it out and you make problem solutions decisions. And he's pretty good at knowing what they're going to manifest to. And I respect that. And one of the things people don't know about him is he's a great listener. He will sit in a room and he will listen and take it all in, like I do as a businessman, as a CEO. You take it all in and you ask people, or you ask your advisor, and then you make a decision. Right or wrong, but you make a decision, but you make it, and if it's a bad decision, you see it as a businessman and you correct it and you improve on it. And I believe he did that during his presidency. Now, if you said that, if you could tell me where he hurt you during his presidency, that he made decisions that hurt us as a people, I would say, hey, yeah, let's look into that. Maybe there's a problem there. But all you bring up is things like, oh yeah, he was, he's a failed businessman. He had a couple of bankruptcies. I've had 2 bankruptcies in my life, and they were both there. That's what it's in our Constitution. So you can start over and build your life if you make a mistake, and all of a sudden you're not done for the rest of your life.
Yeah, Mike, but you had successful businesses too. He squandered $400 million, but that's not the point. The point is that I'm worried that he's dangerous. You say you know him personally.
I say he's not. If you trust me,
people are moved by that,
he's not dangerous.
Yeah, and how does it personally affect me? I mean, look, this is not the biggest deal for me, even though some would argue it should be. But when he was running the first time around, he said, I want to ban all Muslims from the country. I'm Muslim. So I'm an atheist now, but my family's Muslim. Mike, somebody said, hey, I want to ban Christians from the country. I think you'd probably be pretty upset about that, right? So it's.
Well, yeah, but if that's what he said there to you, I think it was certain countries that were terrorizing that he was worrying about, but I don't know. But yes, if that was said, you have your right there, you have your opinion, and I respect that. And and by the way, comment on your show last time, I said, everyone, you went on the I said, yeah, it was one of my best interviews, greatest times I had, because we talked. We actually talked, and that's what people need to do in this country. And that's the one divide where it really bothers me is this. You got, I believe you have one party here running on hatred for Trump. They just say this, this, and this. And then why wouldn't we run on what you're going to do and what you're going to do like it used to be back in the day? And I really believe the people are not divided. I believe we're not a divided nation. I believe the people, we're coming through a period where, and I know you say you're an atheist, but I believe that God's got his hand in this, and it's whatever happens, it's going to be all, even the bad things. Hopefully he'll use it for good, like it says in the Bible, and we get to a great place.
All right, Mike Lindell, I agree with you that we need to have more discussions like this, exchange ideas, and understand our common bonds. Mike Lindell, CEO of Mike Pillow, we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Cenk. Thanks for having me on anytime. Thank you.
All right, no problem. All right, guys, that was fun. That was an actual dialogue with all these different folks, exchanging ideas. I think that's what we're supposed to do. We're gonna exchange more ideas with our members. And the people who donated through Super Chat, I wanna answer your questions, I wanna read your comments. So look, you could join through the join button below. That's nice and easy on YouTube. If you want to go to tyt.com/2024, number one, we'll take donations there as we're doing a fundraising drive for this year. And number two, if you're, especially today, there's 20% off at tyt.com/2024 for monthly memberships. We appreciate you guys, we love you guys. Thank you for caring enough about this country to hear these conversations so you can make up your own mind. All right, members, I'll see you in the member section right now.